Straight from the man cave, Kinnick Under the Kitchen, authentic, original player artwork is being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. Locally made prints of stars wearing the black and gold from the past, present, and future. How about current Hawkeye superstars Cooper DeJean and Tory Taylor, legends of the past like Jack Campbell, Spencer Lee, and Tim Dwight, plus future phenoms like Aaron Graves. There are so many options available. They make great gifts, and your purchase benefits the Hawkeye athletes wearing the black and gold. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Again, that's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print. Cory Brada here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, a live edition of Hawkeye Hangout featuring Hawkeye fans across the country, across the world, hopefully, and the one and only Coach Don Patterson, who joins me on a Monday evening. Don, appreciate you being here on a kind of a different setting with a bye week in our rear view mirror and talking about a trip to Wrigley Field this next Saturday. How'd you enjoy a week off?
Well, we were busy. As you know, worked Northern Iowa at Illinois State. Really good game to call. A close win for Northern Iowa. So it was a fun game to do and gave us a chance to see the open road a little bit between here and Normal, Illinois.
All right, let's address the elephant in the room. By the way, I was kind of being cynical when I said your weekend off because I knew you actually worked probably a little bit harder than you normally would on a normal weekend in the fall. But let's talk about the big news today, Don. News broke here earlier in the afternoon. In fact, rumors swirling late into the weekend, early into Saturday morning, and then finally Iowa AD Beth Getz releasing a statement publicly that Iowa offensive coordinator Brian Ferentz would not be retained heading into the 2024 season. I did about a 3.5-hour show earlier today talking about the news and just what it means moving forward. My reaction to the decision to make this move at this point in the season with 4 games left in the year. Of course, he will continue to coach and be a part of this program through the last month of the year and then heading into whatever postseason play they enjoy. They will head to a bowl game at the minimum. But what was your initial thought when you got wind of this, and did it blindside you at all?
I was a little surprised. Didn't expect it to happen. And it's obvious, Cory, I've been as frustrated as anyone, I guess, with the struggles for the offense. And yet, having said that, my heart really goes out to Brian because, Brian bleeds black and gold. He does. He cares dearly about Hawkeye football, and both he and Kirk, when the staff changes were made and Brian had his new duties, both of them wanted things to work out smoothly, of course, and not just for the benefit of Brian and Kirk directly, but for the benefit of Iowa football. And it's disappointing, I'm sure, that it hadn't worked out as Brian hoped. But let's give Brian and Kirk credit for putting the interests of Iowa football ahead of their own personal interests. It's not easy to admit, big competitor. It's not easy to admit that things haven't gone as we need them to, and I give him credit for deciding that they have to do what's in the best interest of Iowa football, and at this point, that would mean different leadership on offense. And it was easy for me to share with anybody that cared to listen. More than anything, I want Iowa football to win these next 4 games, and I'd love for Brian to have one more opportunity to coach in Indy in a conference championship game. And that's a realistic goal. Of course, we can talk about the race and how it all stacks up as we get into the program, but that's what I hope for Brian, and that's what I hope for Kirk. That's what they deserve.
I can tell you the response that you're going to get from people in the chat, Don. In response to your comment, I think what you just said is totally fair. It does sound like this was not Brian or Kirk's decision, though, based on what we got from Beth Getz today and based on the information I've heard. It does not sound like this was something that Kirk or Brian agreed with. So I'm not saying. I mean, at some point, Beth has to do what's best for the program as well, and I give her credit. Ultimately, if the decision came down to her having to make the final one, somebody had to do what was right for the program in general, whether that was directly Brian, Kirk, or Beth. I agree. This had to happen. I feel for Brian. Absolutely. I think it's unfortunate that this all went down the way it did. It's very similar in a way. Maybe it's unfair to compare him to this, but I think about what happened with Nebraska and Scott Frost. He's always going to be looked at. I mean, obviously he had a historic career at Nebraska, but he's always going to be remembered for his failures as a head coach at Nebraska.
Right.
And if he never had come back to coach at Nebraska, he would not have that legacy. Even if he failed somewhere else, he'd always be the favorite son, so to speak. And unfortunately, Brian was a solid player at Iowa. In fact, he had a solid career when he took over. I believe is what O-line coach here. He coached tight ends, coached O-line. Those units were pretty good under Brian Ferentz. Now, I'm sure credit him, but it's just unfortunate. I wish that it hadn't happened the way it did, to where Brian is elevated to OC at Iowa, and because this is how his legacy is going to go down at Iowa, and it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to use an analogy, if I'd been asked at some point in my career to be an offensive line coach, I don't know how well that would have worked, because that wasn't my background. And I think Brian had that same issue when he became a coordinator. It's difficult. If you've never been directly involved with play calling on offense, then it's that much tougher, I think, to become a good play caller.
Okay, we're going to be talking to people at least for the next hour. I've got to keep this show relatively short because I went 3.5 hours earlier than did a half-hour basketball show a little bit ago, Don. So I know you'll probably be fine with cutting this thing a little bit shorter than normal. But obviously, this is the big news item. We do have a football game to talk about this coming Saturday against a Northwestern team that has proven to be dangerous and a team that has proven that it can beat Big Ten competition, including a decent Maryland team and a Minnesota team that beat Iowa here 2 weeks ago, or a little over 2 weeks, or a little under 2 weeks ago, excuse me. So we're going to be taking calls, taking comments. We've got Ryan and Clayton on hold. If you want to talk to Coach Patterson, I can obviously converse, but I was on for 3.5 hours earlier. If you want to talk to Coach Patterson, the number to call in is on the bottom of the screen, 515-635-1601. You can also click the link in the description below this video on YouTube. Again, 515-635-1601, or join us by StreamYard. Let's add Ryan to the mix. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Good evening, gentlemen. Thanks for taking my call.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, Coach. Hey, Cory. Haven't talked to you in a long time, but I hope all's well with you and the fam.
Been a few hours.
A couple hours, yeah. It's been a few minutes. Hey, in light of everything, and we hashed it out, but Coach, is it fair to ask you if you were a betting man, what percentage the end game in this, at least for the next year, as Kirk stays and accepts reality? Maybe he gets Paul Chryst or somebody like that. Any ideas how this might end up? And I don't want to ask you anything that you're not comfortable with answering.
I really don't have any good idea of how this might all play out. It's even if Kirk and I discussed it, I wouldn't share that,
of course,
discussion with anyone else. But the reality is we haven't, and we may not. And that's up to Kirk, of course. But Kirk's shown a lot of good judgment through all these years, and I think he'll display good judgment going forward too. So I don't know what's going to happen next. I'd like to think that we still have the inside track in getting to Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. I don't think there's much doubt that the Gophers, is that right?
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, the Gophers. That's right. Their game 11 is at Ohio State. I'm pretty confident that Ohio State's going to find a way to win that game in the shoe against Minnesota, and that'll give Minnesota their third loss. And if we can hold serve for these 4 games, if we can find a way to win each of them, then that's the only team that stands in our way. And Ohio State could help us out. And at that point, we'd be co-champs, and we represent because of our head-to-head win. So I think it's entirely possible that we earn our way back to Indianapolis. I realize that's a tall order because we haven't won 1 in a row, much less 4 in a row. But I think we'll have the right approach. We'll approach it one at a time. Think of it as a hurdle race, and we got 4 hurdles left. And the only way to guarantee that you get over all 4 hurdles is to focus on that next hurdle. And so we only have our focus on Northwestern, no one else. And if we can jump over that hurdle, then we can move on to the next one.
Interesting you say that, Coach, because I agree with everything you said. And obviously, no one's guaranteeing we're going to win out up to the bowl game, but it's entirely possible. In your mind, Coach, who's our quarterback? Number 11, number 5, or number 10? By the way, I gave you in my personal order.
You listed number 5 first?
No, number 11, then
We
number
listed 11
5.
first.
Absolutely. At this point, absolutely. Number 11, number 5, and I think my distant third has got to be, the chosen one in this circumstance, number 10.
Well, first of all, let me just say this. I agree with number 1.
Number 11.
Yeah, number 1 on your list, number 11 jersey.
I know it.
I got you. Number 1 in your heart, though, too, right, Cory?
Yes.
I will say this. We're all aware of the fact that a freshman can play in up to 4 games without losing a year of eligibility. So if we're lucky enough to get a comfortable lead in any of these 4 games, it seems logical that we would absolutely take a look at number 11. And truthfully, it wouldn't bother me if we gave him a limited playlist and put him out there when the game was in doubt, because I am curious as to how he would play.
I have a hard time seeing Iowa building. Just to be frank, I have a hard time seeing Iowa blowing anybody out to where you're able to put in guys like Marco Lainez when the game is not in doubt. If you're going to put in,
God forbid he throws for 50%.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Don, I don't know.
Well, let's not forget, just less than a year ago, we had 2 defensive scores against Kentucky. We also had 2 scores, non-traditional touchdowns against Rutgers. So it is possible that we by virtue of our excellence on defense and in the kicking game, it is possible that we pick up some extra points there.
Could you just imagine Cooper DeJean doing what Cooper DeJean does and then gets, 15 offensive plays, 7 or 8 touches? Just what could happen? I mean, you're talking Heisman, Charles Woodson, plus special teams, all of that good stuff. I mean, a guy can, just imagine, right?
Well, part of our problem, as both of you know, is we typically are on the field more on defense than we are offense. We have a hard time staying on the field offensively, and there are times when we've had a hard time getting off the field with our defense. So Cooper invariably gets more snaps than any offensive player, and then you factor in the kicking game and punt returns and punt coverage. It's a lot of snaps, and we certainly don't want to try to play defense without number 3.
Agree. It's just a few, maybe targeted plays to shake things up because
just a few little.
He's our most talented player. You get your ball in your most talented player's hands when, frankly, you 3 and out yourself to death and kill your defense.
Well, to use a military term, you're talking about using Cooper with maybe what we might want to classify as a surgical strike, huh?
Hey, exotics, scratch where it itches. Let's do it. We have to. And you know what? I don't think there's a legitimate Hawkeye fan alive that would be upset that Cooper made 2 or 3 big plays or plays alone on offense when it mattered. He's our best player. He can weave through. Get him in space. Just get him in space. See what happens. He can handle a hit. He's done it his whole career.
He proved this past Saturday he doesn't need space. That's the other thing he proved.
And a man with it, right? I mean, obviously you're not going to use Caleb Brown, who's, I guess, on paper, the highest recruit out of high school that ever played wide receiver, outside of Willie Guy, I guess. But you're not going to use him, evidently, for whatever reason. It is what it is. But, I mean, we got to get some talent going. We got to get our talent that is on our team working for us. And I don't care if it's Vines. I don't care who it is. Austin guy. He had a really nice game too. Little good blocking, beautiful catch. We got to just develop.
Let's face it. This deep in the season, we need to try to explore all options in terms of making big plays, because explosive plays do matter. They matter a lot.
Absolutely. But we can't continue to live off, barely beating bad teams and playing down to them. There's a lot of examples of that. And, so long as you win, you're okay, I guess. But, Minnesota showed it's not sustainable, and it's going to get less and less sustainable as the format changes. So with that, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
All right, Don, I knew these comments would come in here. Brian says, Don, do you think this was Kirk or Brian's decision?
I honestly don't know. The one thing that confused me a little bit, Beth's comment did mention that this is not the way she typically likes. I forget exactly how it was phrased, but she suggested it's not her nature to make any changes within the season, during the regular season. So that made me wonder, is it in fact Brian's idea? Is it Kirk's idea? Is it the university president's idea? I don't know. But it was clear that in my way of thinking, the way her statement read, it's not the way she preferred to operate. So I don't know if that means she didn't. Who was the ultimate decision maker? Was it the university president, or was it someone else? I don't know.
Yeah, here's the official statement from Beth Getz. We read this earlier. She says, anyone who loves Iowa football recognizes both the successes and challenges that have brought attention to our program this season. Our struggles on offense, coupled with the offensive coordinator's contract, make this a unique situation. After conversations with head coach Kirk Ferentz, coach Brian Ferentz, and President Wilson, I informed Brian that our intention is for him to be with us through the bowl game, but this is his last season with the program. Making this known today is in the best interest of the program and its loyal fans. It provides clarity during this pivotal time in the schedule. It is not my practice to be involved in assistant coaching decisions, and certainly not to make public such a change during a season. Our priority is to put all our student athletes in the best position to have both short-term and long-term success on and off the field. Our football team is a group of outstanding young men and talented athletes who at 6-2 have a lot to play for. As a former athlete, I know every opportunity to put on the jersey is a cherished one. As Hawkeyes, let's continue to support all our coaches, staff, and student athletes in their pursuit of a Big Ten championship and bowl game victory. So, Don, just to recap, when she says, again, none of us, we're all breaking this statement down. But when we see Beth say, it is not my practice to be involved in assistant coaching decisions and make it such a change make a change public during a season.
Right.
That tells me that these are not normal circumstances, right? I don't interpret.
That doesn't necessarily mean that it still wasn't her decision.
Right. That's how
she might say I'm simply going against the way I would normally operate, but I think it's necessary.
Absolutely. And obviously she said, in that second paragraph that she informed Brian that that's the decision. So, based on what Tom Kakert said earlier on this very show, Kirk is not happy about this right now. And Don, I don't think anybody would be happy about it. And most head coaches want to think, hey, I've got control of who's on my staff. But that's
Right.
where it gets slippery and where it gets dicey and unsteady and uncomfortable when you have a relative on your staff that's not performing up to expectation.
Yeah, here's the reality. Any number. I, as a head coach, and I'm sure Kirk's done it before, and Hayden certainly did it any number of times. Bill Snyder, anybody else that's ever been a head coach, you might from time to time remind an assistant coach, I want to remind you that you serve at my leisure. You have a job here because I've invited you to have a job here. And I do have the authority to replace you with someone else. And of course, if a head coach can say that, then certainly an AD can say it, or for that matter, a university president can say it too. So they're all in the chain of command, and they all have the authority. Any of those three individuals have the authority to make that kind of decision.
A couple comments here. D. Rellison with the super chat. Thank you here. Minnesota loss was the last straw. Iowa will hire a great OC. Well, I sure hope so. Sure hope so. We can talk about Coach Patterson's thoughts on that position here moving forward. Brody said with the super chat says, I'm as happy to see Brian to go as the next guy, but Coach brought up some good points. You know, the man bleeds black and gold. Got to be the toughest thing this human being has ever gone through in life. I feel for the man. Good practical way of looking at it. We don't have to be. Everybody knows me. I've been very critical of Brian. I've been very critical of Kirk over the last 3 years and how this offense has operated. But I've made very clear over and over again, nothing personal against either people. And yeah, you feel for somebody when they get fired. I made the comment earlier today. You don't want people to get fired. But I think it's fair, and I'll say it. I don't need you to say it, Don, but this had to be done. This, I believe, in my opinion, had to be done for the best interest of the program. And it does sound like it was a decision ultimately that was made above Kirk Ferentz's authority here. And again, it's just unfortunate. I think we can all agree the situation was very unfortunate. And hopefully this can be put behind us. I'm sure Brian will find a job somewhere, Don, because he does have a resume as a tight ends coach in the league, coaching O-line in college. He briefly coached running backs, I believe. He's going to be able to figure out wherever he goes, he's going to be able to make a good living. And he's made a good living at Iowa so far.
Correct.
Now, CJ in the chat wants to know. Thank you, Brody, for the super chat. CJ says, can you ask Don, is it a different coaching perspective, coaching inside of press box to down on the field? It seems like Brian got worse when he made that move. We've talked about that, Don.
Yeah.
I don't know why that wasn't tinkered with. You would think maybe that would be, I'm not saying that was the issue at hand, but you would think desperate times come for desperate measures. We never saw Brian attempt to transition back to a press box role. Is that something that you've thought about as far as maybe something that could have been done before such a decision was made?
Well, there's no doubt about this. From a play calling standpoint, it's more difficult to do it on the sideline. Now, as an offensive coordinator, my job was up in the press box. Of course, I was in the press box for all 21 years that I worked for Coach Fry. And as you know, those last 20 were all at Iowa. And I had a chance to observe Bill Snyder in the press box. I had a chance to observe Bill Brazier and Bob Elliott in the press box. And frankly, to me, it's more logical that your coordinator would be upstairs because you need to be able to see the field. How can you make good calls if you can't see the field? And it wouldn't be surprised to you, Cory, to hear that the sideline is very chaotic, and it's not easy to make sound judgments as to how people are reacting to the play. You know, let's face it, if you're a little further away, a little further removed from the field, you can see all 11 players much better. So at the very least, you better have good intel coming from upstairs from someone. If you're a play caller on the sideline, some play callers on the sideline have been very successful. So many others, I think, do a great job because they are removed a little bit from the chaos of the sideline. And I know I appreciated being able to spread my information out, being able to access a lot of information that was within arm's length, either to my left or right or directly in front of me. And that's the luxury you have when you're up in a press box.
Why is Phil Parker able to be successful without being in a press box?
Well, there are some advantages to having a coordinator on the sideline. The most obvious is Phil's coaching the back end. He has a chance to interact with his players in a short amount of time. Every time they come off the field, he can look them in the eye. And I think even Phil Parker would tell you, I'm not going to be very effective unless I have somebody that services me with the set of eyes upstairs. I don't know who that somebody is on defense, but somebody's giving him good intel from upstairs, because I think even Phil would tell you it's difficult to see things from the sideline. You got to have good advice from on high.
Okay, STM basketball, did you not expect it to happen at all, Don, or did you just not expect it this week?
Well, I was certainly surprised that it would happen here. Frankly, I would have expected it to be more likely last week during the bye week than another game week. But to be honest with you, I didn't think anything would happen until after the regular season was done. And, of course, it would depend a lot on what happens these next 3 weeks before we play that last of the 4 games remaining. So, yeah, I fully expected that nothing would happen until after the regular season was done.
Okay, Jake in the chat, what was the point in coming out with this news today instead of waiting until the season is over to announce it? Tom Caker brought up an interesting point earlier when I asked him this question, Don, and I think it's fair with the early signing period in December and the potential of players entering the transfer portal when the window opens right after the end of the regular season. There is a bit of an onus on administrators to potentially give those players, both those high schoolers plus the guys that could potentially decide to enter the portal, reason to reconsider a non-Iowa decision prior to December. Is that maybe part of why it's beneficial to make a move prior to the end of the year? That
could be part of it. Maybe part of it too. I don't know precisely what their thinking was, but it wouldn't be hard to imagine that, in a strange sort of way, the fact that the decision has been made maybe takes a little bit of pressure off the offense. In other words, maybe now they can relax if they realize it's already been settled. Maybe there are some, even who knows exactly what the individual mindset might be on any given with any particular player. But maybe there are some people on the team that actually, I'll give you an example. Maybe this actually helps because Deacon now feels like, well, at least Brian's job is not in my hands anymore. Brian's going to be coaching somewhere else next year. And maybe in that regard, maybe it'll even free up Brian to be a little more free-willing with the way he calls the game. I don't know. It's really hard to know what the effect might be, but it could certainly maybe take a little pressure off the offense to know this has already been settled. So now let's just try to go out and execute and be as good as we can be with each passing week. But at least we don't have to feel like Brian's job is at stake because that decision's already been made.
Let's go back to our phone line. Clayton is on hold. Clayton, welcome back.
Hey, Cory. Thanks for taking my call again.
Absolutely.
Hey, actually, the chat kind of answered a couple of my questions. So we're rolling with that, I guess. Coach Don, I do have a question for you, though. Now that Brian is, he's not on the hot seat. He's on the dead seat. He's gone. How do you think that changes the way that he calls games? Do you think that it alters his mindset and maybe we see a little bit more risk out of his offense?
I think it's entirely possible. Now, I don't think we're going to go crazy with our play calling, don't get me wrong, but in some ways the pressure's off. Brian's going to be working somewhere else. Let's put it this way. There are some people out there that really think our problems offensively are not so much with Brian as with Kirk. You've heard that theory that Kirk controls the offense and Brian would be a better play caller if he didn't have to listen to his boss all the time about how to call a game. Well, now he's not going to be in that same capacity next year. So maybe now, if that were the case, of course, and you can tell by the way I'm talking, I don't think that is the case. I do think Brian's given a lot of freedom with how to call a game, but now he's a little more inclined to be a little more aggressive with his play call, and I think that's entirely possible.
Yeah, what you said there, Coach, was a lot of folks that are beyond the Kirk era have not, experienced the Kirk era. A lot of them are, following football for 10 years or so. They haven't been in it like we have. My first game that I witnessed was 1998 or 1999 against Indiana in Kinnick Stadium. And that was Kirk Ferentz's first year. And it was a terrible year. It was horrible. But what my point is, some of the people that want Kirk's head is because they haven't followed the program long enough to understand what he's done for this community. But I appreciate you guys' time, and I'll kind of just leave it at that.
Well, what you said is really true. There's so many people that, I'm going to say it this way, anybody that knows Kirk very well at all will not hesitate for a second to comment on what high character he has, what a good man he is, what kind of leadership he's given this program, what kind of stability we've had as a result of Hayden and Kirk now for 45 years. Pretty amazing when you think about it. And as you know, we don't have the same recruiting footprint of Ohio State or Michigan. So it's not the world's easiest job. Let's face it. You can't just do it with in-state players. You've got to have success recruiting outside the state. And of course, maybe more important than recruiting success is being really, really adept at developing those players once you have them. And recruiting players, and it's also so important, recruiting players with great character that are going to give you everything they have, not just for a few weeks in the fall, but really 52 weeks a year.
Yeah, and I really believe that our team, we're missing one thing, but the one thing we're missing is a pretty important thing. It's offense, and what Iowa team have you heard of that had all three facets really, really going? And there might be a couple, but it's not.
Well,
very many.
And Cory's heard me
ahead.
talk. I was just going to say, I'll admit this, and Cory's heard me talk about it. I just reflect back on the three championship teams we had, 1981, 1985, 1990. All three of those teams had one thing in common. They were really, really good on defense. They were really, really good in the kicking game. And, oh, by the way, really, really good on offense, too. I can't say that about the 81 team. You've heard me publicly say, Cory, this team reminds me a lot of the 81 team because we weren't that good on offense. 85 and 90 were different. We were really good on both the offense, defense, and kicking game, all three areas. And the beauty of having a team like that, that's how you win championships, because sometimes the offense bails out the defense, sometimes the defense bails out the offense, and sometimes the kicking game is the difference in the game as well. So that's been especially true with our 85 and our 90 teams, both exceptional teams that were good on both sides.
And the aggravating thing is, Coach Don, is that we only need an offense that is adequate. We don't need one that is amazing. And
that's correct.
It's not hard to come by if you have the right coaching staff, the right personnel, which I believe we had the right personnel. I think you see where I'm going there. All we need is adequate. We do not need amazing on offense for this year, 2023.
If we had an offense that was in the middle of the pack, that's the middle of the pack, I guess officially would be ranked 66 or 7. Cory, is that right? How many teams are there now? 132, 133? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think 133.
133. So 67 would be in the middle. 67 would have you averaging, I don't know, maybe close to 30 points a game. Certainly over 25, right? I think 25 would put you at about 80-something. So you'd be averaging high 20s, if not low 30s a game. And then, of course, the yardage to go with that, which would probably be, I'm guessing, at least 375 per game or more. Considerably higher than where we are now, of course. But, the upgrade would be significant because, to average 10 points more per game is significant. But it could be done. And the point you've made is an accurate one. You don't have to be in the top 20 offensively to do that. You just need to be at least average to slightly above average. That would get it done.
Yeah, I appreciate your guys' time, and I'm we'll see what happens with Northwestern. I don't see us losing to them, but we'll see what happens.
Thank you for the call, Clayton. Appreciate it, sir. Okay, so Iowa Hawk in the chat says Kirk has earned the right to decide when he wants to be done. Anyone who thinks otherwise needs to check themselves. I agree. I absolutely agree. He has earned the right to decide what he wants to do. The bottom line is they've been winning a lot of games, Don, and it's fair because of the situation with Brian. It has been fair for people to question whether it's okay for Brian to continue as the OC here. He's also the son of Kirk Ferentz. There's a difference there. But as far as Kirk is concerned, until they stop winning games, they're 6-2 right now. You could argue they should be 7-1. He's not on the hot seat, nor should he be. And just got word. I just saw this tweet from our good friend Tom Kakert. Players will not be available tomorrow for their normal availability. And it sounds like, based on everything I've been told, Don, it sounds like Kirk's really making an effort this week to avoid any distractions for his players right now.
I think that's true. Obviously, he doesn't want this to have have any kind of negative impact on Saturday's game. And so for that reason, I think it's safe to say he's going to be sure that distractions do not exist.
Brandon brings up Northwestern has been playing better. This is a dangerous game on Saturday, one that Iowa cannot take for granted, and Kirk realizes that. And I'm sure here's the thing about here's what I'll say, Don. As it relates to the situation and Beth Getz making this decision and leaving Brian in his position for an extra 4 to 6 games. All right, but depending on the Big Ten title game, etc. I think one reason, if you want to look at a positive, one thing you could argue that goes in Iowa's favor on this is that, yes, you are essentially firing, letting go of your offensive coordinator. However, this is not just some offensive coordinator. It's the son of Iowa's all-time winningest coach.
Right.
He's a former player. So in that regard, Don, Brian's not going to be mailing it in the last 5 to 6 games of the year.
No, I don't worry about that for a second.
Absolutely not. And I'll give Brian, let me just say this. I know people think I've had people say, you're just out to get Brian. I never have had any vendetta against anybody, but certainly not Brian Ferentz. I will give Brian this. Based on what I just said, he will coach hard for these last 2 months. I believe that. And he may not get the job done. The offense has not been good for 3 years. But if there's anybody that it's safe, and I don't want that to sound inappropriate, but if you're comfortable allowing somebody to coach the rest of the year, even when that decision has been made that he's not going to continue with you moving forward, it would be a guy like Brian Ferentz, who you have confidence loves the program. He loves the program. Right. I mean, this isn't he has not worked out as the OC, Don, but he loves the program. He's an Iowa alum.
Yeah, he's not going to do anything over these next 4 games to undermine this football program.
He's not going to do that to his dad. He's not going to do that to the program. So I give Brian Ferentz credit for that. And I've had my differences with Brian as far as just how he sees offense and, kind of how he's interacted with the media. But that I have confidence in, and I think that's credit to who he is as an Iowa Hawkeye. Brandon says Northwestern's playing better. Yes. Can we just briefly, and we're going to talk about that before we wrap up the show, Don, but can you briefly talk about what you've seen out of Northwestern, and I'm sure what Kirk has seen out of Northwestern? They've had an extra week to look at them.
Yeah, I was hoping you would ask me about some specifics in the game. I've got a few notes here. Northwestern was impressive in beating Maryland 33-27. This is what's amazing to me. They sacked Maryland 6 times. Maryland, oh, by the way, has a mobile quarterback, much more mobile than number 10. That's a concern. They were +2 on turnovers. They also had 364 yards of total offense. Maryland had slightly more, but let's not forget, Maryland has a pretty explosive offense. They always have had. But when you look at explosive plays, guess who won that in that game on Saturday? Northwestern did. Northwestern had more explosive plays than Maryland.
And that's against a Maryland team that normally dominates their opponent, even when they lose in explosive plays.
Exactly. So what's amazing when you look at it, Maryland actually won slightly more parameters than Northwestern did, but it was close. Out of 25 parameters, Northwestern won 10, Maryland won 12, and there were 3 ties. But obviously, both teams won some of the most important parameters. We know that turnover margin is important. Northwestern won that. We know that sacks are important. Northwestern won that too. We also know that red zone appearances are important. Northwestern won that as well. So Maryland won their fair share. But what impressed me so much in watching, I haven't seen the game start to finish, but I've seen the replay. I've seen the condensed version of the game, the 60-minute condensed version. I saw a bunch of Northwestern players that were playing with a lot of grit and a lot of determination that did show a lot of resilience. And the quarterback, by the way, I left being very impressed with that young man. He played a super game last weekend against Maryland. I think Maryland thought they would just show up and roll over Northwestern, but Northwestern their ideas. And that's the challenge we face right now. As the head coach said, he said, our guys would prefer, someone mentioned, do you realize this is another double-digit favorite that you've been able to beat? The first one, I guess, I would assume must have been Minnesota, I guess, probably. So they beat Minnesota. They were double-digit favorites. They beat Maryland double-digit favorites. Oh, by the way they beat Minnesota impressed me. They beat them 21-0 in the fourth quarter. Think about that. So when you win a game like that, that gives you a big boost in confidence. I like to think back, Cory. You remember the poster you've seen of birds in flight? Maybe you've never seen this poster, but I have. The caption is, they can because they think they can, right?
Yep.
How are birds able to fly? How does a bird leave the nest and fly? Well, before very long at all, they see their parents, I guess, flying, or at least mom or dad, whoever's tending the nest, and they think, why can't I do that? Maybe I'm not quite ready in terms of maturation, but before very long in the nest, they're able to fly. They can because they think they can. Right now, Northwestern's playing good football because they think they can. It's been reinforced. You know, when you knock off a team as when the other team's a double-digit favorite, that's a good way to boost your confidence level. And right now, Brendan Sullivan is playing at a high level of confidence. And oh, by the way, you've always heard me talk about an ideal quarterback being able to extend plays. This guy can extend plays. He threw for 265 against Maryland. He ran for 56 yards. And understand this, when he does buy time, when he extends plays, he's prepared to run, but he's still, as he closes on the line of scrimmage, he's still looking for receivers downfield. And those receivers understand what to do in a flush situation. They're not confused about where to go. Typically, they're either breaking deep down the field or they're coming back toward the line of scrimmage. It depends on what they need. If they need a big play, you can bet they're breaking deep downfield. And they've hit a lot of those plays, especially starting last Saturday. Nebraska did a great job of containing them the week before. I'll admit that. 17-9 was that score. But let's not forget, I've been impressed with Nebraska's defense for a while now, and the numbers back it up. I don't know where they stand right now nationally, but it wouldn't surprise me if they're still top 20 in run defense, maybe top 20 in overall defense. I don't know. But I know this, when they played Illinois and beat Illinois at Illinois, I made the comment to you after that game, Cory, I'm very impressed with the athleticism of Nebraska's front seven. Nebraska was able to slow them down for sure. But let's not forget they played in Lincoln. And that's going to be another tall assignment for us, is to go to Lincoln and win. The day after Thanksgiving, there's a lot on the game. And the odds are there will be a lot riding on the game. So that's what we face up ahead. Northwestern has a high confidence level right now. We're going to have to shake that confidence. The only way to do that, of course, is go out and make plays against Northwestern on Saturday starting at 2:30.
Nebraska. You mentioned Nebraska, the 13th ranked total defense in the country. And as it relates to scoring defense, Nebraska, I keep saying Northwestern, Nebraska 21. So they're top 25 in each category. And now we both admit, Don, that some of those numbers are inflated because they play in a conference that's not very good offensively, in a division that's not very good offensively. But one thing you brought up about Northwestern, Don, and I don't have the schedule side by side, and I can certainly bring these up, but they were getting beat handily by teams last year. And I know it's a different roster, but they don't have Pat Fitzgerald, who was long considered one of the best coaches in this conference, at one of the most difficult jobs in this conference. And all of a sudden, Northwestern's playing almost everybody, tough. You mentioned even the Nebraska game was a one-score game. What is different about what Nebraska looked like last year? And, of course, that was a team Iowa won very easily against in Kinnick. What's the difference between that team last year and what you're seeing from this team this year in 23?
I don't know how many of those guys that played a year ago are still back with us. I suspect the vast majority are. The quarterback's a good example. He actually played against us last year. I was surprised to read, I believe he played in 5 games a year ago. I think, again, it was tied to injury. Were you aware of that? It looked like you're surprised.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
He actually played, I believe, in 5 games last year. He actually played against us. And I was surprised to read his numbers actually were pretty good against us. I think he threw for 150, 160 yards. He ran for a modest amount. He threw for a high percentage. I think he threw for maybe 60% or so. They didn't ask him to do much, but the bad news for us, he's a lot more seasoned quarterback than he was 12 months ago too, because he's a year older, a year wiser. He's got more game experience. And he's playing football with more confidence now than he did a year ago. That makes him a better player. I think he's got teammates that are very much in that same trend, that they were trending upward, from one year to the next. And I give the coach a lot of credit. I listened to his press conference today. I didn't know the first thing about him, but I was impressed with what he had to say today in that press conference. It's obvious that he's done a good job of instilling some confidence in those players. Those guys are bought in. Right now, he's been able to use that as a motivational tool to help Northwestern. Nobody believes in us. He made the comment, it was a double-digit point spread, but I've already told our players, you're the guys that can decide what the point spread is, not the people in Vegas. You're the ones that decide because you're going to determine the outcome of the game. So if the point spread was Maryland by 12, I don't know what the point spread was, but they were able to prove, that was inaccurate. That should not have been the point spread. We proved otherwise. So I'm sure we're favored right now, but it's probably less than double digits, I'm sure. So who are we to think that it's going to be an easy game? We know better. I'm confident those players representing Iowa will know it's not going to come easy this Saturday or any other Saturday that follows. We better be ready to bring our A game. We found out against Minnesota, anything less than our A game is not going to be good enough.
Kyle in our private chat threw in there, and I appreciate this, Kyle. Northwestern had a point differential of minus 157 in 9 Big Ten games last year. That's good for 18 points per game. That is mind-boggling, Don. And just to kind of remind people of what they were in 2022 with Pat Fitzgerald, their one win on this continent was against Nebraska. Or their one win during the season was on a different continent. Let me make sure I rephrase that whole thing. They won over in Ireland against Nebraska, 31-28, lost by 8 to Duke, lost by 7 to Southern Illinois at home, lost to Miami, Ohio at home, lost by double digits to Penn State, lost by 35 to Wisconsin, lost by 7 on the road at Maryland, maybe their best performance of the year if you look at that overall in their losses, lost by 20, gave up 33 to a really bad Iowa offense in Kinnick. Actually played Ohio State tough on a windy November 5th date in Chicago, lost by 14 at home, lost by 28 to Minnesota, lost by 8 to Purdue, lost by 38 to Illinois, lost by 17 to Rutgers. Now I'm into 23. So far this year, 17-point loss to Rutgers. They come back, beat UTEP by 31, got blown out by Duke, competed hard against Minnesota, came back from, 21 down, forced overtime, won in overtime. Penn State lost handily to a really good Penn State team, beat Howard, competed against Nebraska, beat Maryland. This is a dangerous team. And I did not expect that out of a squad that, the perception around this program has long been, Don, that Pat Fitzgerald has kept them relevant. And it's a hard place to win. And maybe they will, meander back into the Northwestern that they were back when you were coaching in the Big Ten. What was Northwestern like during the Hayden Fry era for people that weren't alive then?
Well, there were some people that if they wanted to be a little derisive, is that the right word? Derisive toward Northwestern. Back in those days, sometimes they were referred to as the Wildcats rather than the Wildcats. That's it. And as you know, there was a period of time when we absolutely owned those guys. Not just us, a bunch of other teams too. But I give, the crazy thing of it all, if you didn't know better, you would say, this reminds me of any number of Pat Fitzgerald teams I've had in the past. A bunch of overachievers. It's almost as if Pat Fitzgerald is helping coach on the side or something, giving the coach good ideas about what to say next, because he's saying all the right things, I do believe.
Bob wants to know Don's take on the play.
Well, I feel kind of like that guy that was sitting behind home plate tonight in the World Series. Did you see him?
I did see a picture of that. I did.
And for those that didn't see it that aren't baseball fans, he did hold up a sign at some point that said, how was it worded exactly, Cory? It was not a fair catch signal.
I did like that. The big tiger hawk behind home plate.
Yeah.
By the way, I have not watched a second of the World Series. So who won tonight, Don? Is that game over?
I don't know. I watched it up through about 7 innings. The Rangers were up 3-0.
Okay.
For the record, I am a huge Ranger fan. I've been one for all 52 years of their existence. They've been in exactly 2 World Series. They didn't win either one of them. And oh, by the way, when the San Francisco Giants beat them, the manager for the Giants is the guy that's now the manager for the Texas Rangers. Bruce Bochy is his name, and he's an outstanding manager. He's pushing all the right buttons for Texas now, I would say.
Always a few people that are on this show that always go out of their way to correct me. So apparently earlier on a live stream for Iowa and Quincy, the men's basketball exhibition game, Don, I made a comment that Belmont plays in the Ohio Valley. They now play in the Missouri Valley. So James had to reach out to me on Twitter to make sure I knew Belmont is in the Missouri Valley now. So they are not in the Missouri Valley in football, right, Don? What is Belmont? What is Belmont football and what are they?
I don't know that Belmont has a football team.
They've got to have some football team. They may not be maybe they're not FCS, but you don't think so?
I honestly don't recall ever seeing a football score for Belmont. Okay. Now I will admit I don't see all the Division II and Division III scores, so maybe they do have a team. I don't know if they do or not.
Tyler says Rangers win 3-1. Don.
Tyler, you've made my night. Thank you. I'm TiVoing, and I'm going to see the last couple of innings when I'm done with Cory tonight.
Good thing we didn't start earlier, Don, because we would have been right in the middle of the World Series. I did not realize there was an overlap there.
My first loyalties, Cory, are to you and our listeners. So the baseball game would have had to wait.
Overcame what you said, 52 years of Rangers fandom, Don. How about that?
Never won a World Series, but why not us? Why not now, right?
Why not? And I guess I'm a Dallas Mavericks fan, so I'll be happy for the Rangers if they win. BC in the chat. I read Beth's comments as she felt she was forced to make the decision due to Kirk Ferentz and Barda's unwillingness to do what was obviously necessary themselves. So that's how BC kind of interpreted the move. Doc P. Don, what portal needs does Iowa need to address this offseason? I know we're not done with the season, but it's a fair question, Don. We don't know what's going to happen as far as attrition via the portal. And could we see some change with this incoming recruiting class with this news from Brian? But what positions would you focus on at this point, targeting in the portal about a month and a half out from that window opening?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind for me was let's look at the seniors that are leaving the program. And obviously, if we have great seniors, we need to be able to replace them with great players. And if we don't have them in the system already, in the program already, we better go out and find them in terms of the transfer portal. Good example this year was Nick Christian. Why did I say that? I had a player named Nick Christian.
Nick Jackson?
Nick Jackson, yeah. I had a player at Western named Nick Christian, but Nick Jackson, good example. You know, he was a proven success story at Virginia. He saw an opportunity to play in the Big Ten, and not just to play, but with just a little bit of luck to earn a starting position. Of course, he's done that, and he's been a good success story for us. So first thing I would look at is which of our players right now are key performers and they're not coming back. We need to look at maybe unless we just feel really good about a backup, then we maybe need to look to fill that particular need. One spot that obviously we need help, we need more playmakers on offense. So, you know, obviously you're looking for another challenge there, of course, is the question's been asked, why would a top-notch receiver be interested in going to play receiver at Iowa? And the obvious answer now is, well, is it hard for you to imagine that the offense next year is going to be more than a little bit different than the offense this year? And I know some critics would say, well, it's the same head coach. So even if the play caller is replaced, it's still going to be a conservative game plan, and it's going to be still controlled by the head coach. You might argue that. But it's not hard to imagine if we can get some game breakers that can prove themselves as game breakers, then I can't believe for a second that we wouldn't make a real effort to get them the ball at every opportunity. You know, that's one reason. You've heard me say, Cory, if you're not doing a good job of separating from your coverage or not doing a good job of catching a pass, then is it hard to imagine there might not be too many passes headed your direction? Or maybe you don't even get that many snaps to begin with. So you got to earn your way on the field. So I'm hoping we look for game breakers. I would like to think that it really doesn't matter that much how tall they are. I know in the past sometimes I think we've been a little bit preoccupied thinking all receivers have to be 6'3". And you heard me remind people, Tim Dwight wasn't very tall, and I think he's pretty good. That guy, what's his name, Tariq Hill, is playing for Miami right now in the pros. He's not very tall. He's pretty good. How about Wardell? He's pretty good. He's not very tall either. Coach Fry famously said, you never weigh or measure a man when he crosses the goal line. Damon Gibson wasn't very tall when he played here, and he was exceptional. I had a guy that was 5'4" at Western Illinois that returned a kickoff against Nebraska and caught him and had another punt return for 94 yards against Eastern Michigan. You know, a couple of FBS schools that were on our schedule. He measured 5'4". If he was 5'9", everybody in the country would have recruited him. But because he was 5'4", we got him. And we made good use of him. Because, again, no one was measuring him when he crossed the goal line. Is it hard to imagine, Cory? He had really hot feet. He could change directions on a dime, and he had good acceleration. He had pretty darn good speed, too. So you can win with guys like that. Let's not assume they have to be 6'2" to make plays. Because the 6'2" guys in general do not move their feet like a 5'10" or a 6-foot guy.
5'4"?
Maybe 5'5" then. How's that? I'll call him 5'5".
Okay.
Even Nebraska had a hard time catching him, though. He returned a kick against Nebraska. That's not easy to do. We haven't had that many returned.
Okay, Jason in the chat says, Coach Patterson, do a DC and OC communicate very often during the games? For example, Phil is obviously very good at what he does. Would he go advise Brian Ferentz different coverages, strategies he sees from the opponent's defense?
No, not going to happen that way, and I'll tell you why. When the defense leaves the field, Phil Parker is talking to people down on the field about adjustments that must be made from one possession to the next. At the same time, of course, the offense is going on the field, so they're directly tied up at different times in affecting the play on the field of play. So there's simply not time to spend a lot of time discussing. There's no way that a coordinator on one side of the ball would recommend what needs to be done on the other side. Maybe during the week, if they were discussing, maybe they were looking at some video, they might casually ask the other coordinator to come in, give me some ideas about how you'd attack this particular defense, this particular offense. You might see some of that during the week in game preparation, but probably not in the course of the game. Wouldn't happen.
Erica Goldberg, thank you, Erica, for the super chat. How's Maryland's defense? Does Northwestern really have a good offense, or is that defense just bad?
I just got you back, Cory. Are you waiting for me?
Yeah. What do you think? What do you think about the Maryland D?
I think that's part of the problem. Maryland's notorious for getting really tired and disinterested in the latter part of the season. They're notorious for playing a good first half of the season and then running out of gas. It's happened. How many years has it not happened? Seems like it happens every year.
Is that a scheme thing that teams just kind of figure out what they're doing as the year goes on, or why the
Well, I think part of the problem is simply if you want to compare character. I'm not going to disparage the Maryland players, but I would suggest to you maybe they're not quite as high on the character scale as Iowa players. I think you win with character. You heard me say that, Cory. It is not easy to be at your best every Saturday for an entire football season. That is not easy to do. That is a huge commitment because being at your best on Saturday involves practicing at your best during the week. Our players will tell you we can't afford to have an off practice because how are we going to be better from one week to the next if we don't make progress during the week? That's the mindset the players and coaches have. And I would suggest to you that maybe Maryland doesn't get that done with the same consistency as we do. Maybe that's why they don't improve as the season plays out. Some teams seem to get better. A good example is Northern Iowa. Northern Iowa within the Missouri Valley Conference, they're notorious for playing really, really well in November. You don't want to play them in November because they're playing their best in November. Truthfully, every team should be playing their best in November because that's what it's all about is correcting your mistakes from one week to the next and being better as the season plays itself out.
Thank you, Erica, for the super chat. Cole, curious if Don has watched any Nebraska this year.
I have.
Care to share any thoughts on? I mean, you talked about their defense. Statistically, they've been pretty darn good, especially compared to recent years. But how big of a threat are they to knock off Iowa in final week of the season on Black Friday?
I think they absolutely are a threat to do so. It's going to be a difficult game. It's entirely possible that they'll go into the game as the favorite team. I think if they're not, it'll be a very, very tight point spread because Nebraska right now, correct me if I'm wrong, Cory, they're 4-4 also. Is that right at the moment?
I know they're tied with Iowa Big Ten record-wise.
Yeah, I'm not sure what their season record is. I can't remember non-conference. They're 3-2 in the conference, of course.
Yeah, you're right. I'm looking at the. Well, I just lost it. Right now, Nebraska's overall 5-3 in the conference, 3-2. 5-3. We're all 3-2 in the conference.
5-3. So pretty impressive. Think about this. Nebraska hadn't been to a bowl game lately, right? To do that in year one, that's impressive. And it also, I haven't noticed this. Put yourself in the shoes of some that are in the best, maybe haven't been there too long. Is it to imagine they try to model Iowa a little bit for all the success we've had in Kirk's years, or for that matter, even in a lot of Hayden's years. The one common theme in recent years with Iowa's key to success is outstanding defense, outstanding kicking game, and we'd like to believe at least a serviceable run game, right? So you think about it, that's kind of how Nebraska is trying to play. Outstanding defense. They shored up their kicking game to some degree. They blocked a kick and ran it back last week, blocked a field goal and ran it back for a touchdown, right? That's one of their scores in that game. And they're running the ball with some regularity. Let's face it, Minnesota's had that same mindset as us all along. They had a backup running back that carried the ball 40 times last weekend for 204 yards. Nobody saw that coming. I can't even remember now who they played. Who did Minnesota play to win that game so convincingly? Who was that? Michigan State. Well, we know Michigan State's another one of those teams that tends to lose interest as the season plays out right now, right? That's part of their problem. So I give credit to PJ for hitting them over the head with the running game and winning the Minnesota way too. That's the way Minnesota's won in recent years. outstanding running game, stingy defense. That's a pretty good formula for success in the Midwest. It's been good for us. It's been good for Wisconsin. It's been good for Minnesota. And is it hard to imagine that Nebraska might decide, you know what, maybe we're trying to throw the ball around too much a year ago or 2 years ago. And this year is a more run-oriented offense on the part of Nebraska. I think that's probably suits our weather very well in the month of November. So we're going to have a lot of close, hard-fought games, I think, here in the month of November.
All right, Don, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with the finale, whatever that entails. We've got Kyle waiting on hold. We've also got a caller on our phone line. We'll be right back with more, but first, a word from our sponsor, Iowa Floor Covering. They've been with us for quite some time. We appreciate Iowa Floor Covering. We will be right back after a word from our sponsor. To Iowa Floor Covering, a locally owned flooring store in Bondurant, Iowa that specializes in do-it-yourself projects. If you're a contractor or a DIYer, Iowa Floor Covering has your back. Right now at Iowa Floor Covering, get tough core click-together 4.5 millimeter waterproof vinyl flooring for $269 per foot when you install it yourself. That's a much better value than you'll find at any of the big box stores. Looking for other types of flooring? They can help with that too. Between their exceptional product knowledge and commitment to customer service, the guys at Iowa Floor Covering will provide everything you need to complete your DIY flooring project. So what are you waiting for? Skip the box stores now and visit iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. That's iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. Promotional pricing only available with self-installation. All kinds of flooring needs. Iowa Floor Covering can help you and your family out with your needs. Even tile showers, they can certainly help you out. So again, iowafloorcovering.com. We appreciate Tyler, Ryan, and the Hawkeye fans down there in Bondurant. Don, before we get to a couple more comments, and then we've got, again, Kyle, and we've got somebody on our phone line. Can I run through a list of names that were brought up this afternoon when we were talking about potential replacements for Brian?
Sure.
And I'm just going to read you these names because these were names, and I may have missed some. And if I did, somebody can throw them up in the chat. These are not names I'm endorsing. I'm simply bringing up names that people brought up. All right?
Don't tell me one of them is Bobby Stoops.
No, but I did laugh at. I said that somebody's going to probably say that, and I'm going to have to make fun of them. Ryan Grubb is obviously the first one. They're not getting Ryan Grubb from Washington. I know he's an Iowa guy. He's going to get a head coaching job somewhere. Why would he come to Iowa to be the OC under Kirk?
It's worth a phone call, and maybe he would be the heir apparent to Kirk Ferentz to be the coordinator. That'd be a good reason.
Okay. All right. Worth a phone call. Hey, I'm all for phone calls, Don. John Budmeyer is obviously one that people are going to bring up. I'm not saying he should get the job or he shouldn't get the job. I'm just saying he is going to get brought up, and he's going to be on the list of potential candidates. I think that's fair.
Are we going to put him on the list because of performance in Colorado State? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not. I'm going to put him on the list because I know he's got a strong relationship with two of Iowa's current quarterbacks. He's got ties. He's married to a Hartlieb. He's got strong ties to Iowa. He's been working with Iowa for the last 2 years. That's why I'm putting him on the list. And he's a former quarterback. So I would anticipate he understands the passing game a lot better than Brian Ferentz ever has. That would be my yes.
That's a fair rationale to have him on the list. Absolutely.
Chip Long, our good friend Will over with Notre Dame, and he contributes over to the Mark Rogers show quite a bit. He brings up Chip Long from Louisville. Don, what do you know about Chip Long?
Well, with Chip Long, is he a lot better now because of the play caller at Louisville? Is that why he's better all of a sudden?
So you knew he was at Louisville.
My point is, who is the play caller at Louisville? I suspect it's a guy named Jeff.
Don, I didn't know who Chip Long was. Maybe that's because I'm not a college football junkie or a former coach like you.
Well, I don't know much about Chip Long at all. I just simply know, in my mind, the play caller at Louisville is a guy named Jeff Brom.
I know, but I'm just surprised you knew he was at Louisville. That's what I'm saying. Anyways, so he was Chip Long, in case people don't realize this. was at one time a tight ends coach for Illinois back in 2010, 2011. Then he was tight ends coach in the Pac-12 at Arizona State. He was OC at Memphis in 16, OC from 17 to 19, OC at Tulane in 21, and then he was at Georgia Tech for 1 year, and now he's at Louisville as an analyst. I'm just bringing up the name, Don. Don't shoot the messenger. All right.
Gotcha.
Nate Shieldhouse. Don. I don't know what Iowa State's paying Nate to be at Iowa State, but his dad played at Iowa. He was
a guy by the name of Nate Creer.
Yep.
And he was a very good football player.
Played for you.
I do have a measure of respect for Nate Shieldhouse. I think he is an outstanding coach. Played at Illinois, as you know. And let's give not just Nate, but also Matt Campbell and also other coaches on that staff. John Haycock comes to mind, outstanding defensive coordinator. Let's give them credit. When they started the season 1 and 2, I bet there were a lot of people and names that wondered how this was all going to play out. And I think it's been an exceptional job on their part to get them to this point in the season that they're at right now. I mean, a bowl game is almost a given at this point. The question is, can they actually find a way to get into a championship game? There's a chance of it. They got a lot of work to do, but it's possible.
But Don, can you comment on the idea of Nate Shieldhouse at Iowa?
Well, one negative is a lot of our fans would not want to hire a coach from Iowa State. I think there's some truth to that.
Give me a break.
I'm serious.
If Dan McCarney, if Barry Alvarez can go to Wisconsin and Dan McCarney can go to Iowa State, I'd be happy to welcome Nate Shieldhouse to Iowa.
Yeah. I'm impressed with what I know about Nate Shieldhouse. I think he's a fine young coach.
I don't see Kirk Ferentz poaching Nate Shieldhouse from Iowa State. I don't see that happening as much as some people would like that for that to happen. Number 5, Paul Chryst.
I have a lot of respect for Paul. I know he's an outstanding person. I knew his dad years ago. His dad was a coach himself. And probably, truthfully, one of the negatives, it's not really a fair assessment, but a lot of people would say, no, he's not sexy enough. You know, he's too old. He's trending downward because of the way things finished up for him at Wisconsin. But Paul Chryst did have a lot to do with the success of Wisconsin. There's no doubt about that. I'm talking about as a coordinator. And then, of course, his record as a head coach was overall impressive, too.
All right. Let's go to number 6 on the list. A guy named Don Patterson. Oh, I'm sorry. That was a clerical error. Let me skip. Let's go to number 7, Don. Let's skip to number 7. Randy Hedberg. Now, hold on a second before you comment.
I know a lot about Randy.
You know a lot about Randy. Randy was this has been noted on good authority on this very show. Randy was absolutely interested. He was interested. I can tell you that with 100% certainty. He was interested in the Iowa quarterback coach job when it was open here like a year and a half ago. Iowa told him no, they were not interested in even interviewing him. Now, he has been the passing game coordinator at North Dakota State for a number of years. Is he qualified to jump to an offensive coordinator spot in the Big Ten? I don't know. I do know this, that Iowa has a running backs coach that I'm fairly confident in. So could you potentially elevate Liddell Betts to run game coordinator and make a guy like Randy Hedberg your quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator? Is that something that would be on the table?
You could. And I don't know that Randy would have an interest in that. I suspect he might. Let's face it, for those that don't know, Randy's probably not going to coach that many more years, maybe 5 more years, I would think at the most. And maybe one thing we know for sure, North Dakota State cannot pay like Iowa can pay. So he would have a chance to maybe triple or quadruple his income for a year, or for several years, I should say. And that might be enough motivation for him to accept a title less than offensive coordinator. Let's face it, if he's the passing game coordinator, could that work? I do think that ultimately you need one play caller, not 2. But let's face it, The play caller could get a lot of input from a running game coordinator within the course of the game and simply be the final decision maker in terms of run versus pass. So it could work that way. Some people do work it that way. I'll give you an example. When I was the quarterback receiver coach, as soon as Bill Snyder left, Paul Jackson was the run game at Iowa. I was the passing game coordinator at Iowa. Carl was 10 years my senior. It didn't bother me at all. I had the title of offensive coordinator because I knew Carl's going to dictate the runs and I'm going to dictate the pass. And that's the way Coach Fry wanted it. And it didn't bother me that someone else had the title because when Carl left for the 49ers, I then became the coordinator too. I should say had the title. I was already coordinating pass anyway. So I don't think Randy Hedberg is that preoccupied with titles. He'd probably be more than okay with being considered as the passing game coordinator, especially if we gave him, I don't know, maybe $500,000 good reasons to accept that title.
I think it's funny when people like, let's see here, M. Finn in the chat. Hedberg is almost 70. Look, he's 68 years old. And how many years does Kirk have left? All right.
Not very many.
If Randy's got 3 or 4 years and he can make, a few $1 million while he's here, why not? Look.
Hey, would we begrudge Kirk and Randy if this program was in a much better place 3 or 4 years from now when they both retired? That wouldn't bother me at all if they could put us in a better place.
Let's not hire with a view to age at this point in Kirk Ferentz's tenure. Let's hire the best qualified person. Frankly, Don, the case could have been made a way that maybe the Bryan situation could have been remedied is if they were willing, and I'm talking about Iowa in general, was willing to bring on Randy a year and a half ago. They could have made him the passing game coordinator then and made Bryan the run game coordinator. That maybe we wouldn't be in this situation now, frankly.
Well, for those that don't know, North Dakota State has had maybe right now, 3 quarterbacks in the NFL. All that came from North Dakota State, none of which were highly recruited. Who were they all coached by? The same Randy Hedberg.
Yeah. I don't give a crap what a guy's age is right now. All right. So that's where I stand on this. Number 8, Andy Ludwig, Utah, former offensive coordinator at Wisconsin. And his name was brought up, I believe, in the latter half after Tom Kakert joined the show. I don't think Tom brought up Ludwig. Maybe he did, but he was at Wisconsin, I believe. I want to say back in like the 2018. Maybe I'm mixing him up with someone else, but I was thinking he was at Wisconsin back. Maybe was he coordinator or quarterbacks coach at Wisconsin? So we wrote these down as we were going, or I wrote these down as we were going, but he is kind of an interesting name. And I don't know how old. Let me see how old, since we're concerned with age. Let's just see how old. Do you know anything about Andy Ludwig, Don?
I'm just vaguely familiar with the name. I do not.
59 years old. He's 59 years old, and I've got his resume here. So he was at Wisconsin as the OC from 13 to 14. Then he went to Vanderbilt until 18, and now he's the OC. He's been the OC at Utah since 2019. There's a guy, if you look at the resume, you're thinking, okay, that might be a guy we could steal from a Power 5 program because he's going, granted, Utah's going to have a home in the Big 12, but
yeah, here's one more reason to consider him. There are 4 Pac-12 teams that are going to be playing in the Big 10 next year. He knows about those teams already.
Correct. And like I said, is it fair to say that the Big 12 is likely to place third fiddle to the SEC and the Big 10 in the coming years? So you could say that's a step up. I don't know what he's getting paid right now at Utah, but I'm guessing Iowa could compete.
And for those that want to be critical of the way Utah's playing right now, I know this for a fact. They had a really, really good quarterback that was injured in the early season. They've been doing it with the backup quarterback and doing okay. They're competing well in the Pac-12, even if their offense is not in the hands of the starter, but in the hands of a backup.
The next one's a kind of funny one, Don, because I brought his name up like 2 years ago when we were talking about potential replacements for Ken O'Keefe. Let's get Bill Lynch back out of retirement. I think Bill, talk about old. How old is Bill Lynch now?
Is that Bill Lynch Sr. or Jr.? I think his son was Billy Lynch also.
Where's Billy Jr.?
Bill Lynch used to coach at Indiana, right? That's the one you're talking about.
Absolutely. And keep in mind,
and I believe had Ball State also, right?
He's a former quarterback, played quarterback at Butler, was the head coach at Indiana back 2007, 2010, finished his career at DePaul University, and retired in 2019. Now, he is no young spring chicken either. He's 69. But like I said, I'm not looking at this age. So too old, just throw him out the window.
My gosh, he's only 3 years younger than I am.
Yeah, I was going to say. And then finally, last one is probably a reasonable thought, and that's Tim Polasek from Wyoming. Of course, he was the OC at North Dakota State, got hired on to Iowa as the O-line coach. I had to do some research because Wyoming had some problems. Was it last offseason or the offseason before? Of course, their head coach, Craig Bohl. But Tim is still the offensive coordinator there. And obviously had a lot of success at North Dakota State. Now, was that because of him or just that program and the staff around him? Of course, what they were able to do with guys like Randy Hedberg has been impressive. But your thoughts on Tim Polasek possibly making a return?
Yeah, I just don't know that much about – I mean, of course, I know him. I would think there'd be better choices on your list, frankly. That's just my opinion.
So, all right, give me a name, Don, that I didn't list in those 10 names. A couple of those were kind of just fun names I wanted to toss out to you, like I don't know.
This would be a good exercise. I would recommend this. If you look at the national stats, look through the teams that are, maybe to be a little more specific, look for the teams that are top 20 in total offense, top 20 in scoring offense, top 20 in rush offense, top 20 in pass offense, because you're looking for balanced run and pass, right? And then when let's say you come up with 5 teams that have top 20 or top 25 status in all those categories, 4 of those teams aren't going to surprise you at all. Maybe there's one team that surprises you that they're in there. I'll give you an example. For what I know, Tulane is a really explosive team right now, or has been. I'm not sure how they've done that. Obviously, you consider their schedule. But here's my point. There are some coaches that are doing a great job, and you simply don't know about it because maybe they're not playing in a high-profile league. But it's at least worth investigating sometimes. I'll give you a prime example. Years and years ago, a wise old coach by the name of Bump Elliott hired a guy that was coaching at North Texas that had some success at SMU. But when Hayden Fry was hired at Iowa, that really wasn't national news because he was toiling in anonymity at North Texas. He wasn't on the front pages of all the sports pages. But Bump Elliott knew this is a guy that gets out of his talent. This is a guy that can take his players and beat your players, and he can take your players and beat his players. That's the kind of coach you want, a guy that can win regardless of which side of the field he's standing. The same thing would apply to an offensive coordinator. Let's find a guy that seems to have a habit of pulling a large rabbit out of a small hat. That's the guy you want to find, a guy that's somehow producing better than it defies logic how well he's producing at the school that he's at. And he might not be at one of the perennial top 25s. He might be at a team that's, is fighting to become a top 25 program, but that's clearly making progress. They're out there. There's a few of them. You got to do some research to find them because maybe we don't know anything at all about them right now, and we simply haven't looked hard enough yet.
M. Finn brings up a great point. Let's just call Bill Snyder. He's only 84, Don. Let's do it.
He's only 84.
84. Let's bring Bill back.
He's still a really sharp 84, I promise you that.
Amen. Hey, is Carl Jackson available?
Carl's only 73, I think. So, wait a minute, what am I thinking? That's not right. He's 83, I think. He and Bill are both 10 or 11 years older than I am. So
Well, then they both be at the top of my list, Don. Real quick, I was just going to say, somebody in the chat brought up Bodie Reeder. What do you know about Bodie Reeder?
It's funny you mentioned that because I worked a game where Bodie Reeder was coaching, and it was last Saturday. And now I'm trying to think, was he I know he's one of the coordinators last Saturday, but now I'm trying to think of which one.
Yeah, he's the OC and quarterbacks coach.
Where, though, at Illinois State or at UNI?
At UNI.
At UNI. UNI's got a good offense. They do. They do a nice job. He's a guy to consider. I just don't know that much about his background. I don't know.
Let me just read you some of his background. So he joined the Panthers in spring of 2022, was on the Auburn staff as a quality control guy, and had some offensive coordinator duties ahead of the 2022 season, then got the job at UNI, has coached in 3 bowl games, 4 FCS playoff games, has been a part of 1 conference championship. Of course, during the 2022 campaign, Reeder helped quarterback coach Theo Day into a first-team All-Missouri Valley Football Conference passer. Day led the conference in pass efficiency, pass touchdowns, passing yards, etc. Reeder has coached in stints at Utah State, North Texas, Eastern Washington, Oklahoma State, Wisconsin, Stout, and Eastern Illinois.
But never a coordinator until he arrived at UNI, I guess.
According to what I'm seeing, he was coordinator at North Texas in 2019. He was a coordinator at Eastern Washington from 17 to 18.
How old?
Say it again.
How old is he?
I don't know. That's M. Finn's job to find the age of people.
Well, here's my question. Some players are not sexy enough because they're too old. Others, in my mind, are not sexy enough because they're too young. Here's the reality. You got to sell recruits on the program too. So that offensive coordinator, he better need to shave twice a day because those 18-year-olds are looking at him and thinking, how's this guy going to allow our offense to become great? He looks to me like he doesn't know enough football yet. Maybe
based on this picture of Bodie Reeder, it appears that he is at least old enough to where he's lost some hair. And I'm not ripping him for that, but I'm just saying this is Bodie Reeder. I'm guessing he's not in his 20s is what I'm saying.
He at least doesn't look like a spring chicken. That's good.
Oh, my goodness. I hope this is
maybe it's a Texas term, a spring chicken.
Oh, I've heard it. Believe me, I've heard it.
Okay.
So let me see here. So a couple more things here. Let me find Harpo wants to know if you think Iowa would be in this position. Would this still happen with Brian if that call hadn't happened and Iowa was 7-1 right now?
One word answer, no. I don't think it would happen right now. If we had squeaked by Minnesota, we'd be carrying on exactly the same, I do believe.
Also, one more bone to pick with M. Finn. He says the offense was bad under Ken O'Keefe. It was bad under Greg Davis. Nothing leads me to believe it will be better under anyone else. That's a very generic, very thin comment that doesn't cover the extensity and really the drastic drop-off we've seen over the last 3 years. There were bad offenses under Ken O'Keefe and under Greg Davis, but overall, we've never seen anything like the offenses of the past 3 years. That's a fact.
I'll say this. If Kirk could find the right guy, I'm talking about a guy that was a proven offensive coordinator. And you mentioned the guy that's at Washington. He's proven, right? He's destined to be a head coach. The example I gave, wouldn't he be a little bit intrigued to come to Iowa and not be guaranteed to replace Kirk, but have the opportunity to make a name for himself in the next few years? And logically then, he'd have to be seriously considered to replace Kirk at that point. That's why Kirk would hire him in the first place, is so that Kirk would have someone on offense that he could have complete confidence in and could focus just on being the best possible head coach. That's what the fans are looking for, is somebody that could game plan to the point where maybe Kirk wouldn't have to be involved night and day and would have time to do other things like recruit even more effectively than we already are. And then, of course, be supportive to the other units as well. kicking game, defense too. So who doesn't want to hire a guy that might be able to give us that kind of production on offense?
Bobby says, how about Ben Arbuckle from Washington State? Now, Washington State runs an air raid, don't they, Don?
I think so, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with tempo offense, Northern Iowa ran some tempo offense just the other day.
But
I don't know if State ran more, as I recall. But anyway, go ahead.
It has to fit in with the Iowa system. Kirk is not going to bring in a guy who
he's not going to be.
No,
he's not going to be comfortable doing that. That's like you've been driving a Nissan 370 10 years, and somebody wants to sell you on driving a Studebaker. I don't think so. I think I'll stay with the Z.
Jason in the chat says Freddie Kitchens, North Carolina run game coordinator, tight ends coach.
I don't want to hear about just a run game coordinator. I want to hear about a proven offensive coordinator.
So Randy Hedberg would be off the list, Don, because he's a pass game coordinator.
Okay, well, let me qualify that. A guy that is more than capable of having that title. A guy that knows enough about football to deserve that title.
Let's be honest. You can't. Is it fair to say Iowa would probably not be comfortable bringing in a run game coordinator from somewhere else and hiring a passing game coordinator within? Now, maybe they do that with John Budmeyer, but if you're gonna do that with someone, you're probably elevating a guy like Liddell Betts and then bringing in a guy like Hedberg to coach the pass offense.
It would be logical that coaches and fans might think we need somebody to have an expanded vision of pass offense. Not that we want to turn into an air raid offense, but somebody that really understands all kinds of concepts and how to attack both man and zone coverage with great effect. And that would involve pushing the ball down the field too.
All right, let's go to our phone line. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Who's on the line?
This is John, gentlemen.
Hey, John.
Coach Patterson, could you talk a little bit about the film guys, the managers, and the trainers, what they add to the football team?
Well, they're all unsung heroes. Believe me, this place would not operate, any program would not operate with great efficiency without great trainers, great managers, great people in the weight room. It's really a heavy involvement on all levels. And of course, those managers are unsung heroes. They work long hours. They get very little compensation for their time. I don't know what their compensation is right now, frankly. Maybe it's different than it used to be, but the same could be said for equipment managers. Trainers, I promise you, there are more injuries that you never know about that are simply taken care of through outstanding work in the training room. And I'm talking about a real commitment on the part of the player to be able to be there at all kinds of hours. The same thing can be said, of course, for those athletic trainers that know so much about how to nurse a guy back to health. And sometimes it is a race against time. And they hope to get him back for the next game. And sometimes they make that deadline. Sometimes they don't. But it's not because they don't know what to do, I can assure you. In so many ways, they have to be psychologists sometimes too, because a young man is away from home and trying to get nursed back into good health. And maybe he feels a little bit like a forgotten soul in that he's not able to contribute on Saturday. And so often a trainer is the one that helps him to wrestle with maybe going from the spotlight into the shadows for a period of time simply because he's not healthy enough to be able to play. But all those people do a great job. They're all unsung heroes. An example that some people that are listening are familiar with, we had a couple of legendary trainers when we were there with Coach Fry, a guy named John Streif. If you know anything about Iowa athletics, everybody that's ever played a sport at Iowa knows about John Streif. He's really a living legend as it relates to athletic training. We also had a wonderful trainer by the name of Ed Crowley back in those days too. And those players will tell you, without those trainers, we would not have been able to have the success we had. And the same can be said for strength coaches. The same can be said for those people in the weight room and for those student managers that do all the humdrum stuff like getting the equipment on and off the field and being able to set up drills and being able to make practice run so much more smoothly. It's a cast of a lot of people, and they all have to be doing their job, and they understand, my job. I'm just a small spoke in a big wheel, but my job is still important, and I've got to do my job to the best of my ability, just like that star quarterback or that star linebacker has to do too.
Okay. I have a small request, Coach.
Okay.
I would really appreciate it this basketball season if you'd call in and share some of your views with it. I enjoyed when you called in last season and spoke with Gary Close and Cory on it. That was.
Well, I don't claim to be an expert about basketball, you know that, but I do enjoy watching the game and especially trying to figure out the strategy of the game. I think that's always interesting. I remember there was Indiana a couple of years ago. We were really, really good from three, and Indiana said, no, you're not going to shoot threes against us. So they extended their defense, and we were forced to put the ball on the floor and drive, and they made us play left-handed. It's kind of the equivalent of what we faced last week when we had to throw the ball because Minnesota dared us to be able to do so, by taking away our running game. And so there's similar strategy, even though it's a different sport. The strategy can still be much the same. Indiana had a valid strategy to make us put the ball on the floor and drive rather than give us perimeter shots because we were good perimeter shooters. And they beat us that game too, right over here in Carver Hawkeye. I remember that game very well. It was just a couple of years ago. And that's about all I know about basketball is simple stuff like that. But maybe I could have a little bit of an intelligent opinion of a basketball game. I don't know. I'm certainly not in the same category as Gary Close. He's the expert, not me.
Well, I enjoyed listening to you three, so I hope you'll call in a couple of times this season. So thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, John. Always
my pleasure. I will admit, Cory, I've done some analytics for basketball, and it was interesting because I think it was pretty revealing all over again. Incidentally, talking about analytics, I just got through with Illinois State versus UNI. And how about this for some really strong analytics? I still remember what they were. Northern Iowa, 7 games they'd played. The team that had the most rushing yardage had won all 7 of them, 7 for 7. So if you're Illinois State and you know that, now they didn't know it because I didn't divulge that to the teams. Of course, I didn't bring it up until the game started. But if Illinois State knew in Northern Iowa 7 games, the team that had the most rushing yards won every time, it would have obviously been a goal of theirs to outrush Northern Iowa. They didn't do that, incidentally. That's one reason Northern Iowa won the game. On the other side of the ball, in Illinois State's 7 games, in all 7 games, they had the edge on critical down conversions. So if Northern Iowa knew that about Illinois State, one of their goals would have obviously been to have critical down conversions. Way they did have an edge on critical downs. Again, that's another reason they won a game. It was a close game, but in both cases, UNI had the edge. One last parameter in the game. How about this one, Cory? Explosive plays. If either team won on explosive plays, their record was 11 wins and no losses. There were 3 ties in those 14 games. But in all 11 games, the team that with the most explosive plays won the game. It wasn't always UNI. It wasn't always Illinois State. Maybe it was the opponent. They were both 4-3 going into the game. The point was that had 100% reliability in picking the winner. And here's a shocker for you. Guess who had more explosive plays? The team that won the game again. UNI had an edge on all 3 against Illinois State. So it did apply to men's basketball to a large degree. I don't know that I'm going to do that for basketball again. It's a lot of work. We'll see if they want me to do some research for them. I'll be happy to do it probably because I'll be looking for something to do to stay warm in the winter months, I guess.
Don, just real quick, D-Rel of some of the super chat says, please no Bud Ball. Chryst is a 2-time Big Ten Coach of the Year. I think Paul Chryst should be on the list, Don. I agree with that. I know people don't think that's a sexy pick, but I do think he should be on the list.
Well, Paul Chryst knows a lot about football. I promise. He knows a lot about this league. I would be willing to bet my paycheck if I was still earning one that Kirk Ferentz has a lot of respect for Paul Chryst. I'd be willing to bet that's true.
And you mentioned some of the best offenses in the country. Just perusing through total offensive rankings in the FBS, 3 of the top 10 offenses as far as offense production, and granted, some of this production is against lower tier talent. We understand that. But it's also being done with lower tier talent. But 3 of those 10 teams, Don, in the top 10 nationally, are group of 5 schools. Do you want to take a guess at who those top 3 I would almost guarantee you will not be able to tell me those 3 programs, Don, that are in the top 10 in total offense that are group of 5 schools.
Well, like a school like is Coastal Carolina now FBS or not?
They are not on the list. They're 26th in
26th.
In the
I'll go with Tulane then.
Tulane is not either. Tulane is, where's Tulane? They're a ways down the list. They're not anywhere close.
Okay, maybe they lost a lot of their firepower from last year. I thought last year they were pretty high, but I could be wrong.
They were, yeah, beat USC in the bowl game. No, Liberty's number 8. Liberty right now is averaging 488 yards per game. North Texas, your old Mean Green, are number 9 at 485.2 yards per game. And how about this? Another Texas school, the Bobcats of Texas State, at 483. Now,
I would be curious if they had some balance with their numbers. I think that's always a good sign. Let's face it, you don't want to just hire an OC that has great success in the passing game and not so much in the run game. You know, I think the ideal would be let's find an offense that's got good balance, because I think that does make you harder to defend if you have good balance running pass.
Liberty is second in the country in yards per rush, or excuse me, yards per game on the ground at 280.6 yards per game, only trailing only Air Force. So that would tell me, and I'm looking at passing offense here, that would indicate to me that they're probably not real high in passing offense. Be an indication that they're not real balanced. Now, Texas State is 28th in the country in pass offense, and in rush offense, Texas State is they got to be somewhere close, 18th. So they're very balanced. That'd be a program to look at, right? Is that kind of what you're saying? I mean, I know this.
Yeah, and at least it's worth a look. I'll say that. You know, you got to. Let's face it. You know, I know for a fact Bump Elliott would not have hired Hayden Fry. You know why he hired Hayden? You probably heard the story. SMU played at Michigan when Bump was coaching at Michigan. Here's a shocker. Michigan had trouble defending against SMU. And years later, Bump thought back, you know what? I was always impressed with Hayden Fry because he gave us fits. And one comment I heard recently here, someone had said this, I forget who it was, but someone had run into Shemmy Schembeckler, that's Bo's son. I know who it was. This guy was actually a roommate. I can't remember who it was, but somebody was a roommate with Shemmy Schembeckler at Ohio, in Miami of Ohio, I believe he went to Miami. And Bo was now Michigan, but this person had us to talk to Bo, his son, when Bo's son was a college student, and Bo had just retired. And Bo made this comment about Iowa. He said, I hated Iowa when Hayden Fry was at Iowa, but I have great respect for Iowa because I never did figure out how to defend them, how to defend their offense. That's what you want. You want to hire a guy like that. You know, if it really presents a lot of problems for some really outstanding defensive coordinators, that's the guy you better take a look at. I don't care if he is coaching at North Texas. You know, if North Texas has success, let's face it, maybe North Texas in the Sun Belt, right? The Sun Belt Conference. Maybe if they have success against a Big 12 opponent, maybe that's on their schedule, or some other FCS opponent, that's another reason to take a look at that particular coordinator. Let's take a look at somebody that's getting a lot of mileage out of a roster that's not just overloaded with talent.
You want to go to the young guy, Don? Texas State's offensive coordinator is 28 years old. 28 years old now. Hold on a second. Don't become this ageist. All right.
He hadn't even paid for his first car yet.
Just listen to this. He was a student assistant at UTEP in 2016. Listen to this ladder up the. All right, student assistant. Kirk's not hiring.
Okay.
Him, by the way. Student assistant at UTEP for the minors in 16. Then he was an offensive coordinator at Lehman High School. Am I saying that right? Lehman High School in Texas. You don't know.
I don't even know where Lehman High School is.
2018, he became a GA at Incarnate Word.
Okay.
2019 to 2021, he was quarterbacks coach at Incarnate Word. 2022, he was quarterbacks coach and offensive coordinator in Incarnate Word. Keep in mind, during his tenure as the QB's coach, he was the guy who coached Cam Ward, who ended up going to Washington State. You know where I'm going with this.
I was aware that Incarnate Word had a really good quarterback.
Yes, they did. Dual threat guy. And now he was hired last December as the OC at Texas State. And
now they're lighting it up at Texas State.
20. So we go from either Bill Lynch, who's like 70, to Mark Leftwich, who's 28 years old. But anyways, I digress. Let's go to our next caller. We've got Kyle and we've got the B on hold. Let's go to Kyle. Welcome back, Kyle.
How are we doing tonight, guys?
Kyle, how are you? You think it's golf season? Is that what I see?
Well, as a matter of fact, Coach, I played this Saturday. I've got one more round in for the season. It was about 40 degrees, but I made my way to Iowa City and played Finkbine.
Kyle, you're a better man than I am. There's a thing called wind chill, and I don't want to be on a golf course when we have wind chill.
I don't know. I don't know if it makes me a better man. I think it makes me an addicted man.
Well, you probably hit it a lot further than I do, so this cold air doesn't bother you so much.
Well, we got out and we did some walking, so the walking kept us as warm as we could stay.
Now, don't tell me. I know all about Finkbine. Don't tell me you played all day and didn't three-putt, because with those greens, you have to have putts in there.
That's a good question. Did I three-putt? I think I had two bogeys on the day. No, I don't think I did. No.
That's impressive.
Didn't, no.
Because those greens, I'm sure you'll agree, those greens, now maybe they slowed down with the fall, with the weather, but those greens are treacherous in the summertime. They're fast.
When we got our stip meter out for we hosted the the Iowa Women's Amateur Championship, and they got the greens rolling for that. And I if I remember, I could be wrong on this, but I remember them measuring it at about 12.5 on the stimp, which is only a hair behind Augusta National for the Masters. So yeah, it's a scary place. But
it is.
It's a great design. I love getting back to play there.
Kyle, can I real quick? Do you mind if I put you back in the queue for a minute?
Yeah, go for it.
Because I'm gonna take this last call from the B, and then I know you wanna. Are we supposed to be looking at this golf swing, and we're supposed to get Don's opinion on the golf swing? Is that what we're doing?
We can if you want to. It's up to you.
Kyle wants to get your opinion on a golf swing, Don. So we're gonna take Kyle.
I don't know any more about golf than I know about basketball. So what does that say?
Between your analytics and his golf expertise, we should be able to fix my game. Let's go to the B, who is on hold, and then we'll get a word from our sponsor. We'll go back to Kyle. The B, welcome.
Hey guys, how are you guys tonight?
Doing good. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Hey, I was going to ask you something I was thinking about earlier today. Since Beth swung the axe today, which I was very impressed with, two things come to mind. Is it possible for an AD, even though she specifically said in her press release that whoever Kirk hires is who Kirk hires, but is there stipulations that are written in possibly going forward that they have to approve of whoever he picks to make sure we don't fall into this repetitive situation again that we've had with OCs? Is that possible to even do? Or have you ever heard of anything like that? My wife asked me about that earlier today, and I was like, God, that's a good question. I'll ask them tonight.
I've never heard it stipulated in someone's contract. I do know an experienced AD, if there's an opening, a key opening on staff, the AD might say to the head coach, Coach, I'd appreciate it. You know, I'm a former coach myself. Maybe he would say that. And I would appreciate open communication with you as to who this next coordinator should be. You know, a wise AD would at least lay the groundwork for some two-way communication involving the search. That's logical that an AD might do that.
Do you think being that Brian didn't step down from the rumors that were seen circulated, which he's basically told then he's not going to come back. The timing of this, do you feel, I expected this at the end of the year, and I get why they're doing it now. But to me, if that's my son and this happens right now versus the end of the year, this actually changes how I want to stay on here. I know he's got a lot of money on the table, but if this would have happened at the end of the year, I could see Kirk moving on with this and going, okay, I don't agree with it, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to try to do this again. But being that this happened right at this time, this seems like such a slap to him. And I don't mean it shouldn't have happened. It needed to happen, but the timing of it with him and how he takes things like this, I kind of am, I don't know, I'm starting to believe now more that he may step away at the end of the year just because of, this is an embarrassment. He tried to get his kid a job. He tried to get him established. Every dad would do something for his kids. We all know that. But this was a pothole that I wouldn't have walked into. I wouldn't have hired my kid. This was bad news all around when it started, years ago when he did this. This just wasn't a good look. And there was a danger to his legacy and tarnishing how he goes forward. And so, just does the timing of it seem a little bit more of maybe a push than at the end of the year? And I think it helps with recruiting. I think it will help with, giving some clarity that maybe there is a future here for some of these recruits to go, we're not going to be stuck here into this sort of thing. But again, to the previous question, we've kind of seen this before. And so I don't really have a lot of expectations of what could change unless Kirk was to step away from his influence of this stranglehold he has over the offense, because it is a stranglehold. And so just my thoughts. I don't know. Maybe I'm way off on that, but it just seems like there is a possibility that because of the timing of this, he may just want to go, hey, the writing's on the wall. Beth gets swung the axe with an interim tag. That tells you a lot. And to Kirk, I think that's a slight. I think that's disrespect. I wouldn't be surprised if he said, you can't do that. You're an interim AD. I could see him saying something like that.
Well, first of all, I just want to real quick, not to interject, but I think it's likely based on what's out there. It sounds like there was pressure above Beth Getz. So
definitely. So, yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to suggest. Do we know for sure who made the decision?
Yeah,
Isn't it entirely possible the university president ultimately made the decision? Or maybe you could argue that a few key contributors united and maybe effectively made the decision by threatening to take away their support. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's hard to say that one person made the decision. I don't know. We may never know.
Right. All right, fellas. Well, thanks. Let you get back to the golf swing stuff. I'll be watching that intently because I'm still golfing here in Idaho. So yes, it is still happening. We are doing it. So I will watch intently. You guys have a good night.
Real quick. I just want to, can I throw something in there? I've only golfed one time in Idaho. I golfed a little course in, I believe it was Post Falls, Idaho. I don't know where you're at. And we've talked about this before, but it was up in Post Falls or Coeur d'Alene area, but there was an beautiful island green. And I've never golfed Finkbine, just for the record. And I've been told there's a pretty nice island green at Finkbine, right, Don?
Yes.
There's a really nice par 3 and a beautiful island green at this course out in Coeur d'Alene. I don't remember what it was called, but
well, were you at the resort? The Coeur d'Alene Lake Resort has the island hole. So that's right there on Coeur d'Alene Lake. Yeah, that's still going. So we've had beautiful weather, no real snow yet. And so it's crisp and cool, good 40s, 50s, get a little, as the coach would say, a little bit of that wind chill. But once you get going and, you swing a few times like me and miss 1,000 times, you get warmed up because, you're like, I can beat this ball. And eventually it does work. So
let me tell you this. The Coeur d'Alene Lake, just that lake is just gorgeous. You talk about clear water. I miss going out there. It's been years since I've been out there, but Nothing like that lake.
It's a good time right now too, Cory, with the weather the way it is, and seeing the steam come off the lake in the morning, and the dew and the mist. Good time to fish too. It's good fishing times. The cool water, they just come right up to the top. They don't sink down in the summer, because in the summer, it gets real super hot. They dive deep, but it's great. So yep, still doing it, man. So I will watch intently.
All right. Thank you, sir. He's talking my language, talking fishing and golfing, and getting. I'm going to have to head somewhere else other than Iowa, because here we are entering November, and it is supposed to get back in the 50s. But for me, I'm not an ice fisherman, Don. I'm certainly not a snow golfer. I don't go to a lot of. I've never been a simulator guy, and there's some indoor golf places around town. I've never done it. Maybe someone can convince me. Otherwise, you ever done the indoor golf thing, Don?
I have not.
So, anyways, before we get Kyle back on here, and we'll end the show on a high note, do want to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition, and I've talked about them at length. You can start your Ascent spin to win here with their Ascent Nutrition wheel. You can also start your Ascent today by checking out their awesome health products, and as you'll see as you peruse the website, so many different products for so many different needs. And really the products we've been highlighting over the last few months are their 2 new mushroom powders. They're agarikon mushroom, their lion's mane mushroom. This episode is sponsored by their agarikon mushroom, and it's interesting backstory. It was researched by the Department of Defense's Biodefense BioShield program in conjunction with the NIH and the NIAID. The military and government's research into this powder has showed how its rare compounds exerted strong biological activity, and this agarikon can be used to support respiratory, lung health, immune system health, promote a healthy inflammatory response. You can read all about this awesome product and all the benefits, including the ingredients, just everything you need to know before making a purchase. And then a deal when you order through our website, or through, I should say, our code Hawkeyes. You can use the code Hawkeyes at goascentnutrition.com and make a purchase, whether it's the agarikon mushroom or one of their other many products. Use the code Hawkeyes. Start your Ascent today. And just as a reminder, you can mix those mushroom powders into yogurt, smoothies, juices, cereals, etc. Very easy to use and also safe for your pets. Again, that's goascentnutrition.com, and it is owned by a former Iowa graduate. All right, let's finish it off with a little golf talk. Kyle's back with us. Kyle. All right. So how are we going to do this? I can let me share. So this was, just for the record, this was Kyle's idea. I do not want people to think that I'm trying to make this about me here, Don.
Okay. Is Kyle aware that I've done some analytics for golf too?
I think we mentioned it. Was it last year towards the end of the year? I think you joked about it. We didn't really talk about it, but I think you joked about it.
Yeah. You want to hear? Do we have time, Cory?
Yeah.
Well, I happen to be kind of frustrated with my golf game on Figbine, and it happened to be coincide. I played Figbine maybe on Wednesday or something, and then started it was either Augusta National or it was the U.S. Open. I can't remember. It was a major tournament. And as I watched the golf there on Thursday, I was reflecting back on my own game, and I thought, you know what? I swear I missed the putt below the hole way too much. And if I was reading a foot of break, it seemed like invariably I was finishing below the hole. So I made up my mind the next time I play Figbine, if I read a 2-foot break, I'm going to go ahead and consciously allow 3 feet, not 2. And what I found is I no longer missed the ball on the low side so much. My putting was better. And right then it occurred to me, I'm going to chart every putt I can see on TV in all 4 rounds, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, of course, you're at the mercy of whatever the TV shows. But if I could determine every missed putt, there are only 3 possibilities when you miss a putt. You either miss it low, you miss it on the low side, the high side, or you miss it short, and you really couldn't tell if it was going to be low or high. You simply left it short, right? We've all seen that. Here's what I found, Kyle, and Cory already knows this. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but basically, even the best golfers in the world, that are playing on the PGA Tour, they missed almost twice as many putts below the hole as above the hole. Interestingly enough, the guys that were the best putters more often missed barely below the hole or barely above the hole. And of course, they were the best putters because a lot of them went in. And it's amazing how good some of these guys are from 10 feet. They almost never miss. I'm really envious of that because I make some from 10 feet, but I don't make the same percentage they do. And so what I found is, in general, the average golfer for sure misses below the hole. And as you know, Kyle, if you miss on the high side, there's always a chance that the ball will continue toward the hole and fall in the side door, right, rather than the front door. It may fall into the hole from the side. We've never seen a putt fall uphill, though. We haven't seen that, have we? No. So once you missed it low, you've missed it. I will admit, now, if you're putting from 50 feet, let's imagine you're 50 feet and you come up short left. Okay, maybe that leaves you with a straight putt uphill, right? Because it was uphill to begin with. Uphill, let's say an uphill putt that's going to break left. If you finish the hole, maybe you're aligned so that it's an absolute straight putt. You know, it's a 3-foot putt and you're not going to miss it because it's a straight putt uphill. So that's not a bad place to miss, of course. But we're talking about 50-foot putts. Who are we kidding? If it's a 20 or 30-foot putt, these pros are thinking they're playing to make the putt. Unless they're protected, of course, they're finding ways to make long putts. I'll admit from 50 feet, maybe they're more than happy to 2-putt and get on with the next hole. But in general, I found that golfers do not allow enough break in their putts. And that even included, in my mind, a lot of pros. That's what I found. And it was not just one tournament. I think I actually looked at a PGA, a US Open, and a Augusta National. And I got very similar results in all three. That's all I got.
We have a coach on the show that can talk analytics in about 7 different sports, and that all made sense.
I would love to talk to him because
what's funny is me and an old college teammate. He's a personal productivity coach, but he was really into the golf analytics when I played collegiate golf with him, and so he kind of got me into it, and I've been fascinated with it for the last few years. But we actually do golf coaching now, where we take people out on the golf course and we'll play 9 holes with them, and we'll walk them through stuff like that, hole by hole, step by step, as far as what club do you hit off the tee, what club do you hit into the green, and then once you're around the greens, what do you do? And one of the big things we always hammer home is that amateurs, if you're about a 10 handicap, which is a pretty solid amateur player, you're 3-putting just as much as you're 2-putting from 30 feet. And so we talk in strokes gained. Strokes gained is the analytical system that we use in golf. So basically the thought is, if you put together enough decisions that gain you a 1/10 of a shot here, a 1/10 of a shot there on average, then you add that up over 36 holes, 54 holes, 72 holes, you'll do enough to win a golf tournament. So, we coach our players, do not try to make a 30-footer, because if you 2-putt, you've gained on average half a shot over the average 10 handicapper. So if you have 4 30-footers in a round and you 2-putt them all, that's 2 shots that you've gained on your opponent, and you add that up over all phases of the game, and you might end up beating somebody by 5, 6, 7 shots that you're actually no better than skill wise, just because of some of the decisions that you've made throughout the round to pick smart targets and try to do things like lag up 30-footers rather than try to make them.
Yeah, what's amazing to me, you're right. Strategy of golf. Obviously, the really accomplished players all have pretty good strategy, and they're logical with their thinking. But it's amazing how many people, let's say the pin is on the right rear of the green. It's amazing how many people will short side themselves and they'll miss, but they're missing the short side, and now they're trying to get down to a hole that is virtually impossible to get to. And so you have no choice but to make the best pitch shot that you can, and yet it runs 12 feet past, and now all of a sudden, because you short-sided yourself, you're looking at a surefire bogey, if not a double, simply because you were only 5 feet away from where you really thought you wanted to hit the ball, but it was the wrong 5 feet. So you figure out where to miss.
Yeah, there are a lot of holes on Finkbine where, strategically speaking, it takes me on average less shots to get in the hole if I miss the green on the low side from twice the distance as it does putting from half the distance down the hill. That's how
You're
fast.
right.
Yeah.
Sounds like you're especially talking about the back nine on fake bike.
14, 15, 16, 17, 18. All that finishing stretch, those greens are all sloped back to front.
Yeah.
Those back pins are mean.
Yeah. See, Cory, you're getting all this valuable input on all this intel on fake bike. And first time you play it, you're probably going to tear it up.
I don't know how I haven't made it over there yet, Don. I just
Well, I've mentioned a time or two. It'd be nice if you'd do that.
I've mentioned it a time or two as well.
I realize it's a time commitment.
It is. So here I'll share these three videos out, Don, and I want Don you give me your. First of all, you've seen my golf swing before, Don, just to make very clear. But this was actually on a very cold day here recently. I sent some clips to Kyle, and he had the idea of trying to integrate these into the
I'm going to put my glasses on for this.
Glasses on. And here, so we'll start with what should we start with? Let's start with I believe this is.
Now, this is kind of unfair because Kyle actually knows what he's talking about, and I don't.
All right, so we can see this, right? Is this too small? Let's.
You're just saying I have to critique this before Kyle does?
Correct. You have to
Yes.
before Kyle does.
Okay.
So let's get rid of the.
Coach doesn't get to get off of my notes.
Nobody wants to sponsor this part of the show, so let me get rid of that part. Okay. All right. So we've got the swing here, right? And we'll start with a normal play of the swing, Don, and just talk through what you're seeing here. We'll go back again. We'll just keep playing it until you have some input, Don.
Well, I wish I could see the flight of the ball. You know, that's my.
I'm sorry I don't have ball tracker on this thing, Don.
You need to download my shot tracer.
Yeah, shot tracer. How do I get that?
It's I use a free app called Smooth Swing.
Okay. So Kyle, you walk through what you see here, setup and you walked through a little bit of this on the Instagram channel here earlier in the weekend.
Yeah. So what I see at Cory's setup, and I pointed this out to Cory, was his backhand is kind of underneath the club. His palm is kind of gripping the club more so than his fingers. And one thing we would say in the golf world is you always want to grip the club in your fingers because you can get more speed out of it if the club's in your fingers versus in your palms. Like if you try and swing a baseball bat or a golf club in your fingers, it's more robotic, or in your palms, it's more robotic versus your fingers. You can get more speed in it. And then the only other thing I would say is he's a little bit hunched over.
You know why that is, Kyle? Tell you why it is, because I need to actually get fitted for clubs. That's what I need to do. I actually need to get.
So you're too tall for these clubs, you're saying, huh?
I mean, that's my excuse, right?
I would say it's a valid excuse. I think you need about a half an inch extension. You like how I'm able to slow this down into half speed? Isn't that nice? That's not StreamYard, that's Dropbox. So
well, I do like the fact that you were square to your target. It looks to me like your feet were lined up on your target.
Okay, here's Don with some breakdown. Square to the target, right? Well, actually, target's over here. But see, I was playing to the wide side of the.
Well, I was assuming you were worried about short siding yourself, so you're hitting to the middle of the green.
Correct, exactly. Which I accomplished, Don. Okay, so that's Exhibit A. Let's go ahead and go to let's see, Exhibit B, I believe.
Is this a pitch shot maybe or a putt?
This is actually a pitch. Let's go to Exhibit B. So this is a pitch from, I don't know. I wish I had distance on this. I believe this was like 90. I don't know. This is I want to say this is like 90 yards out, but I don't know.
Okay.
All right.
First off, don't scoop the ball. Let the club do the work. Hit down on the ball.
Kyle, I don't scoop the ball, Kyle.
No, he does not.
Do not scoop the ball.
Okay.
Yeah. If anything, Cory digs the ball out of the ground.
All right, full speed first, and then we'll slow down. So full speed first, and we'll slow down. There's a practice swing for you, Don.
Okay.
And then we'll go full speed, and then we'll go back and we'll do half speed.
Like you hit a little bit fat.
I don't think I hit it that fat.
Okay.
I think that was a very reasonable divot for the club he had in his hand. I think.
Okay. I get overruled by the commissioner.
Watch this one more time. So, hey, remember, ball first, right? There's some ground here. There's some dirt, but ball first. See, let's stop it on the. So
Yeah, it was definitely a descending blow. I'll give you that.
one thing, Kyle, you told me is that you think I'm a little steep when I come up with the club. Is that fair?
Yeah. So it's an interesting thing because it's something a lot of professionals didn't used to do that they're doing now. Essentially, what you have to be careful of is when you get to the top of your swing there, you're paused in a perfect spot for me to talk about this. If your first move is a twist with your shoulders, your hands are going to come outside and then you're going to chop down on the golf ball. So when you're in that steep position, you have to be really, really careful that your first movement is to drop your hands down and then turn. And that avoids you kind of chopping down on the ball. So when you make that steep takeaway, it's not necessarily like a death sentence for the swing, but you just have to be really careful that your hands drop first and then you turn. Because if your back shoulder turns out and then you drop, then you're going to hit straight down on the ball and you're going to kind of make the chopping motion.
Okay, so what's happening here? Are my hands dropping?
You were good on these two. You were good on these two swings. I thought your hands dropped relatively quickly first, and then you turned out for the most part. It's that back shoulder that I'm looking at. I don't want your back shoulder to come out in front of your chin before the club gets towards the ball.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense, Don?
Your back shoulder stays back really, really well there.
You got anything, Don?
No, I was just curious where the ball landed. Are you on the green?
Oh, yeah, I'm on the green.
Okay.
I'm on the green.
I shouldn't assume that because it's 90 yards, and I'm not always on the green after 90 yards.
See, it's hard. You're right. It's hard to see without. It's hard to see where the ball goes at all, especially it's an overcast day. I believe I think I was on the green after this shot. So, anyways.
Well, this much I have figured out. Kyle is a student of golf, much more so than I'm a student of football, even. So I have no doubt if Kyle would work with me for a couple of weeks, my handicap would be back in the single digits, no problem, I'm sure.
You know we you know what we should do is we need to organize this sometime in the summertime and get some kind of competition going for the channel between you two, even if it just goes up on social media just for the fun of it.
Cory's going to owe me a bunch of strokes. He's going to have to give me a lot of strokes.
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll do Cory against Don. Cory, you can give Don 3 shots on 9 holes, and I'll caddy for Don.
Okay. I'll take that.
There's my secret weapon.
All right. So Jason in the chat says, he says, I would say a little more upright in the setup. Grip is underneath. Definitely stand closer. Club face is closed. Pull the chain down. So you're going to have to interpret, Mikhail. You're going to have to interpret all this.
Yeah. So pull the chain down is it's something that Sevi Ballesteros. I don't know if you're familiar with Sevi, Coach Don. He talks about that a lot. He was a great teacher of the golf swing. He was a great player first, but he was wonderful at speaking out what he was doing. And he then passed that down to Sergio Garcia, who talks about it a lot too. But pulling the chain down is that motion of kind of starting your backswing by pulling down on a chain and then turning. That's that pull and then turn that he's referencing.
David says, I came for football discussion, turned into golf lessons for Cory. Absolutely. And Lemansky, appreciate the super chat. Lemansky, every time Don talks analytics to his wife, he should buy her flowers.
I don't know if I can afford that.
The more notable comment from Lemansky that I'm seeing is Lemansky says, Cory, stiff approach, shot of whiskey would do wonders.
I get that. All right. Lemansky's not pulling any punches there. So let's go to my drive because I've made the comment, Kyle. I'm much more confident in my irons, even my short game, and then my putting has a lot of room for growth. But I'm much more comfortable with my irons than I'm with my driver. One of my big problems is I broke my driver several years ago that I had invested some money in, and it kind of I feel like it kind of sent me into a funk, and I've been playing with a below average driver in general. And I need to upgrade all my clubs. But anyways, we can take a look at this, and you can tell me, I can kind of illustrate how I feel like I drive the ball and where I feel like I'm at. And then Don, you're going to have an opportunity to really be critical on this one because.
Well, can I point out real quick before we do this that we had a very generous donor that covered your pizza for tonight, Cory. So maybe we can start an initiative of get Cory a new driver.
Sorry. I'll just bring a basket onto the show and with a little sign, and we can just do that.
Cory, I'm curious, how many listeners have we lost here recently with our golf discussion?
We're still 200 plus, Don, and it's after midnight.
It's good to know that they like football and golf.
All right, let's hide Lemansky's comment. Let's make this big screen. Okay, we'll make a big screen first. All right, we can see that, right? Everybody can see that. So, you're going to see a practice swing and you're going to see a real swing, Don. Again, this is my worst part of my golf game, so I know I've got lots of room for growth here. Not afraid to say that. All right, full speed, right? Full speed. Now we go back here, and let me walk through what I believe are some of the issues at hand here, Don, and then Kyle will give his input and you can give yours. So first of all, and Kyle brought this up, you obviously want that incline. I don't know, I'm going to speak in language that's probably not official golf talk, Kyle, but you want to be able to have that right shoulder. For me, as a righty, you want to have the right shoulder, below the left shoulder, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
You're not getting loft with
Cory.
You're not getting loft with your driver, Don. So you have to create loft with your stance. And of course, your weight has to end up primarily on your back foot with the driver, right? Is that fair, Kyle?
Yeah. You're trying to get your weight on your back foot so that you can launch the driver and also push off of the back foot for more power.
So that's interesting. And you brought up too that you thought that you think the ball needs to be a little bit further up in the stance on this. So ball, I would say, is lined up inside of that front foot. You think it should be closer to middle of the front foot?
To me, it looks like it's slightly back of the inside of the front heel, but it's not necessarily where it is. It's relative to where I've seen you launch it. If you're still launching it low from the inside of the front foot, then it's not bad to tee it up a little bit higher and put it even a little bit further forward. As long as it doesn't get past the middle of the front foot, I'd say it's fine.
Okay. But that's good information to know because you always hear, Don, that, that ball needs to be lined up at the front foot. Well, is that, left side of the front foot, right side, back heel, whatever.
Generally, inside of the front foot's what we teach.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, there's probably a little room there, and definitely with my issues with getting that ball up on my drives, that's probably something to keep in mind. So, as I come back here, first of all, there is a decent amount of, my right shoulder is definitely below the left shoulder, right, Kyle?
It is, yeah, definitely below.
That seems like more tilt than the average golfer. Would that be true, Kyle, or not?
I would say that's about what we would teach for shoulder tilt. I would say what it looks to me, and this is, it's easier to see this in person, but it looks like more of the problem is with the weight on the front foot. It looks like you do have the shoulder tilt, but you still have a lot of weight on the front foot. And the other thing I'd say as well is your hands are over top of the ball, if not slightly further forward than the ball. And when you do that, you're kind of taking loft off of the club face. If you move your hands slightly back, then you're letting the natural loft of the club sit where it is, or even add a little bit of loft to it.
And is that also kind of a result? Is that kind of a microcosm of not having the ball far enough up in the stance?
Yeah, definitely could be. Yeah.
Okay. So the weight thing on the front foot, because that's something that, again, I'll just openly admit this. I've never had a golf lesson in my life. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've had one golf lesson. I took a golf lesson, Don. This like a year and a half ago. I took a putting lesson from a pro up here in Ames. And the dude was eating a sandwich. The guy was eating a sandwich the entire time he was talking to me, which he knows what he's talking about. And he gave me some good pointers, but he was eating a sandwich for the entire hour and a half. So anyways.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the golf lesson I gave you where I didn't even charge you for it. Remember that one?
Yeah, I remember that one, Donna. So so as we play this thing through here, you talk about weight. What gives you the impression that the weight is on the front foot as I come through here, Kyle?
So the first thing I would say is, and again, this is harder to see from the front view here instead of the side view. But as you turn your club face back, one thing with getting your weight on your back foot is we want to see your back leg basically flat. If you look at Rory McIlroy, one thing that he does is as he turns his shoulders back, you can see the weight go onto his back foot, and then you see his back leg completely straighten out. And what that does is if you even just stand up and you go on the ground, if your knee is bent and you try and push off of the ground, it's harder to generate force. If your leg is flat and there's no give in your leg, then as you push off of that leg, there's kind of a rigidity to kind of take power up out of the
with that back leg.
Yes, with the back leg. The front leg can stay flexed. The back leg we like to see pretty flat.
So would you say that what you see right now with those two legs, that's not what you want to see? You don't want to see.
It just all it looks like is it does look like the weight's too much on the front foot. And then I'd be curious. The other thing I'd be curious to see is if the weight is too much on your toes, because that can be another thing. If you're kind of weight on the front foot and too much on the toes where you're kind of leaning towards the ball, that can be another thing that takes loft off.
Don, any comments?
No, I don't know enough to say much, really.
Well, let me just throw this disclaimer out there. I want to, and people who've been following this show long enough know I had 2 shoulder surgeries a year and a half to 2 years ago. One was pretty easy shoulder surgery. The other one was a labrum repair. And Kyle, you and I have talked about this because you've had shoulder issues in the past as well. And I'm certainly no professional golfer. I'm certainly no collegiate golfer like yourself. But I can tell everything I do, whether it's basketball, football, golf, in any form, it changes even just basic motions. I don't know, Don, maybe this would be a good question for you or someone like John Streif, but I think that changes how my mind triggers just those actions. Basic movements that I was used to doing prior to surgery. I have not been able to completely retrain my brain to become comfortable with those motions again.
It's something that we talk about a lot with golfers that have had injuries. I had my freshman year of college, I partially tore the muscle that was connected to my spine. And then I had some bone injuries in my back after that as a result. And then I also had an issue with my labrum and my rotator cuff later on in college. And one thing that we talk about is, yes, you're healthy, but are you still protecting yourself during your swing? Because if you're instinctively tightening the muscles around the injured muscle, so the first thing we would do is with shoulder, I would loosen my neck and my back attaching to my shoulder, because those are the muscles that are going to tighten to protect that area, right? So we try to get players healthy, and then we also try to loosen them up so that they get enough confidence in the body part that was injured to the point where they're not protecting it through the swing. Because if you're pulling, when I had my shoulder injury, when I was pulling my arm in, I was kind of my arm was, if you pulled down on my wrist during my shoulder issues, the arm would have halfway come out of the socket. So I was pulling in with my shoulder, kind of keeping it tight to my body, and wasn't fully extending. So I hit some straight up tops just because I was pulling the club in and kind of up and raising the bottom of the club.
The other thing about this is for at least the surgery that I had, that injury, I would agree with what you just said, Kyle. I know maybe slightly different, but for the record, I dislocated my shoulder 30, 40, 50 times over the course of a number of years. And so that's, when you have that happen over again, and it happened for me golfing several times with different clubs. So when your body's used to this motion and, I've actually dislocated both shoulders golfing, which is what's really odd. Really strange.
You said that to me. We have never seen that. I talked to my business partner about that, and neither of us have ever seen somebody dislocate their back shoulder playing golf. Because when you extend through your front arm, it makes sense that your arm is kind of flying out of the socket. Your back arm is rotating and it's staying in until the very end of the swing. So most of the force is on the ball of the socket to stay in the joint, not to pull out. So it had to be right at the very end of that swing, didn't it?
Well, keep in mind, I'm a righty.
Yeah.
And it was my right shoulder.
So you didn't dislocate your left shoulder?
No, I did, but I'm saying my over and over injuries were with the right shoulder. My 2 surgeries were right shoulder.
Okay, those were the surgeries. Okay, that makes
You're
sense.
saying that was a more of a rare.
That's more of a rare one for sure. The one that I had was my right shoulder, but I'm left-handed. So
Let me tell you what happened real quick, and I know we're losing. Well, actually, we're still at 185 people, so maybe we want to keep doing this. But just so you're aware, I first injured the right shoulder years ago. I think I was at some trampoline park like 10 years ago, right? 15 years ago. And dislocated the right shoulder. I had it happen playing basketball, had it happen playing football, had it happen golfing. But then in I want to say like 2019, I had never dislocated my left shoulder before. I go to Top Golf in Omaha, and I don't have my clubs. I'm just playing with these Top Golf clubs. And of course, I'm trying to work with my swing. Okay, how can I make some adjustments? I'm like, okay, I need to really focus on extension, right? Extension through. I do that one time. Focus on extension one time. I come through, and out comes the left shoulder. I'm like, what is happening? That was a painful drive back.
Sounds like you got some really good extension.
Excellent extension. But anyways, so that's my story. And by the way, David says you need to slow your swing down on the driver. You agree with that, Kyle?
I would say your tempo's fine. The only thing I would say is a little bit quick is the transition between the backswing and the downswing. That's probably the only place where you can slow it down just a t- But I wouldn't say it's horrible. Certainly not with the irons.
Okay. Anything else, Don?
I was just going to mention to Kyle. Kyle, one thing I always try to think of in driving the ball, I continually remind myself, if I get in trouble, I get too fast with my swing, and maybe my swing involves too much lateral movement of my weight, and so I'm just continually reminding myself this simple thought: stay behind the ball with my swing, and otherwise I tend to shift my weight to my front foot too much, maybe even in short of impact. And if I stay behind the ball, I seem to hit with more power. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, the lateral movement is something like if you actually watch my swing from sideways, when I was a kid, my first movement would be to shift backwards, actually.
Yeah.
And I haven't got rid of it completely because it's such a natural habit. I've been playing golf since I was 2 years old. So I've been swinging a club, 24/7 basically for almost 20 years. But one thing we would talk about, there's actually sports scientists that do this, and maybe this is a little bit boring for everybody, but they put kind of like electrode pads and they stick them on the golfers, and they track where the energy comes from and how it gets to the club head and then administers into the ball. And it most of it comes from that vertical push up from the ground. So when you sway sideways, you negate some of your ability to push up. The more you sway sideways, the harder it is to push vertically. And when you push vertically, that's where you get all of your power from. So,
Interesting.
By the way, David, I have went through physical. Believe me, I've been through physical therapy more than any person my age should have to. That's
how long have you spent in rehab in your life?
Too long, way too long. I've been to physical therapy at least 3 different stints for my shoulder, I want to say. Right knee, shoulder neck combo in 2020. That might be it. Yeah. But those were 3. I mean, as you know, Kyle, you've been through physical therapy. It's every stint is a stint.
Well, I was just going to say to Coach Don, I think we finally found something that Cory has in common with Tiger Woods. He's always injured. I
will say I love watching Tiger. I have told you this before, Kyle. I have a hard time watching golf when Tiger's not competing, and I've openly admitted that. What is his timeline right now? Does he have? Are we going to expect him out playing professional golf anytime soon?
I would expect Tiger Woods from here on out the rest of his golf life to play 2 to 3 of the major championships a year. I think he's going to try to play in the Hero World Challenge, which for those of you that don't know, that's Tiger Woods' tournament that he hosts. The Genesis Invitational, which is another one that he hosts. And then there's a variety of things he can do with his son, his son is actually breaking out as a junior golf superstar. He hasn't done anything on the national level yet because he's not old enough to, but just the other week he shot a 66 in a tournament, and he's like 15 years old. So a lot of his focus is shifting towards that. I would say if we see Tiger Woods more than 4 times a year actually competing, we're very, very lucky.
Is it fair to say that Tiger would probably like to compete with his son at some point?
He would, and there's a golf tournament that happens in December every year. It's actually coming up soon, and it's a father-son or parent-child duo. A lot of famous names come out, like Gary Player and his son. The Nicklases used to do it. I know Justin Thomas and his dad, Mike Thomas, come out and play in it. So Tiger and Charlie have played in it together for the last several years and drawn a lot of publicity doing it. So we're hopeful he can play in that this year. That is the one that I would say he's really, really wanting to play until his son's 18. Because once he's 18, he goes and plays college golf. Then he might not do that anymore. But that's one I know he really cares about.
Well, Don, before we totally lose our sanity here at 12:30 in the morning, give me some final thoughts on Iowa Northwestern. We talked about this matchup earlier, and Kyle, you can hang around for this. We talked about this matchup earlier. Don, give us some things to watch for on Saturday. And, of course, a game being played at Wrigley Field always makes things that much more intriguing.
Yeah, it does. I think it's never changed. You know, we don't want to play from behind. We're not very good at that. So we got to get off to a decent start. But here's the reality. Even if we're up by 17 to start the fourth quarter, let's not forget that they outscored Minnesota 21-0 in the fourth quarter. Now, I don't think they can do that to us because I don't think Phil's going to allow that. Incidentally, the reason they got back in that game is Minnesota went with the infamous prevent defense, the one that always prevents you from winning. So that's how they really got the ball rolling there in the fourth quarter. And as you know, they beat them in overtime based on that 21-0 in the fourth and a touchdown in overtime. So we need to win on turnovers. We need to win on field position. We need to be prepared for the possibility that they'll extend plays. The quarterback worries me because he's mobile. We just need to hold coverage down the field because they in flush situations they will look to try to hit something big down the field. That's smart football. Just so you're aware, Kyle, I think Cory's heard me say this. Years ago, 1985, we learned that was our one loss at Ohio State, right, in the regular season. There were a couple of situations in which our receivers in flush situations, they were working parallel line of scrimmage, and a DB, a defensive player, I should say, a linebacker typically, undercut our receiver because he was running parallel line of scrimmage. He undercut us, intercepted the ball twice in that one game. Right then we said, never again. So from that point forward, here's the way we coached it. If it's a flush situation as a receiver, you do one of things. You either work deep down the field or you come back toward the line of scrimmage, but you do not work parallel because to work parallel is to invite an interception. So this will make sense to you guys. If you need a big play, what are you going to do, Kyle, if the quarterback flushes? First off, you need to work in a direction he's working. If he's flushing to the right, you need to be running a route somewhere to the right because he can't find you all the way back across the field. He's under duress. So if he's working right, you work right. But if you need a big play, work down the field. It's amazing how often DBs are kind of shut down mentally. When a quarterback flushes, their focus goes to the quarterback sometimes to the point that they actually lose sight of a receiver that's all of a sudden behind them down the field. You see that all the time. Even in the NFL, you see it sometimes. So we have to be prepared to hold coverage in flush situations because I would expect Northwestern to try to try to fabricate a big play off of a flush. And the other possibility, if you just need a first down to win the game, of course, maybe now you're content to come back toward the line of scrimmage, knowing that a gain of 5 gives you that first down that you need to run out the clock. So in that situation, why break deep downfield? Go for a more high percentage pass. But again, don't work parallel, work back toward the line. Keep that defender, if there's one that's trying to undercut you, keep him on your backside. And he can't undercut you simply because you're working back toward the quarterback to some degree. Hope that makes sense.
What I think is amazing is that you look at that that Northwestern Minnesota game. You mentioned it, Don. You had a 21-point lead. Gophers have a 21-point lead in the fourth quarter. They also won that turnover battle. They were +1 on turnovers. But then you look at Maryland Northwestern, and Northwestern took care of the ball. They were +2 on turnovers in that game. Minnesota was -1 in turnovers. Northwestern was +2 on turnovers against Maryland. I think it's pretty fair to say if Iowa takes care of the ball, that's a big if. We saw them turn the ball over 3 times at home against Minnesota the other day.
Yeah.
You're
aware of this, Cory. Kyle's not aware. I worked up a prediction model based on all 64 games played a year ago. It was a prediction model involving 5 parameters, Kyle. And long story short, if you won the majority of those 5 parameters, maybe you win 3-2, maybe you win 2-1 with a couple of ties. But if you win more than the opponent, you won the game 100% of the time last year. Your record was 58-0, and there were 6 ties. But that's the first time I've ever found a prediction model that was 100% accurate over an entire season of Big Ten play. Here's the rest of the story. That same prediction model this year has already had 1 foul up, and that was the game, Minnesota Northwestern. Minnesota won 3 of those 5, and yet they found a way to lose the game. And it's just unfortunate that it happened that way, but it did. So that prediction model that was last year is already going to something less than 100% this year. And I can thank the Fighting Flex for that, because they managed to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory against the Northwestern Wildcats. And back in the day, they were Wildcats, but not anymore. They're a little bit on the ferocious side now.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I muted myself. Iowa Northwestern Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Central Time on Peacock. The mighty Peacock, Don. You got Peacock?
My wife signed us up for it just because she didn't want me to miss the game.
Okay, because you were at the other game that was on Peacock. You were in person for that one, so had to get Peacock for the game you're not going to. You're going to be with me live shortly following the end of the game, right? You don't got a game you're doing for the Missouri Valley on Saturday.
I do not. I'm going to be taking notes during the game, and I'll be ready to jump on the air as soon as you are.
Okay, folks. Iowa Northwestern Saturday on Peacock, 2:30 p.m. Central Time. Lots more as far as coverage right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm, men's basketball, women's basketball, football, etc. We'll talk to you Saturday following the Hawks and the Wildcats.
Kyle, thank you.